Morning. Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting for Saturday, November 9th at the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District, and I think we probably have some announcements, Rena?
Yes, good morning. Welcome to our meeting today on November 9th. Bob Endy will be participating via teleconference, and due to this, all voting must be done by roll call, and board members must identify themselves when speaking. This meeting is being fed live over the internet, and the public can view this meeting by going to our website at www.kmpud.com and follow the appropriate link. If the public would like to make a comment, they may send an email to kmpud@volcano.net.
Thank you, Rena. Peter, may we have the roll call?
Sure. Andy?
Here.
O'Grady?
Here.
Rickard?
Here.
Dornbrook here?
And Epstein.
Here. Okay.
Thank you. We move to oral communications. This is an opportunity for people in the public to address the board on any matter that's not on the agenda. Is there anyone who'd like to do that? Seeing no one, we'll move to item 5. Are there any corrections or proposed changes to either the agenda or the consent calendar? Okay, then the agenda is accepted as written, and I'd like to entertain a motion for adoption of the consent calendar.
So moved. I'll second it.
Let's see, Dornbrook made the motion, O'Grady seconded. Andy, how do you vote?
Andy, aye.
O'Grady, aye.
Rickard, aye.
Dornbrook, aye. Epstein, aye.
Okay, so the consent calendar is approved as submitted. Okay, we now move to new and unfinished business, item 8. 8A is discussion and possible action regarding the design, timeline, bidding process, costs and construction activities associated with the Out Valley Power Line project. Welcome, Michelle. Michael.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Pleased to be here this morning. A little sad there's not more snow out there because I'm kind of tired of construction activities this year.
Oh, no. Still a month to go here.
No, I'm glad to be here today, and I'm excited to give this presentation to show you what we've been doing over the past several months. I'm going to go through a quick...
Keep you close to the mic there, please.
Oh, sorry about that.
I think it's the satellite.
Oh, it's that one? Okay. There we go. How's that? Is that better?
Fabulous.
All right. Well, I'm going to take a couple minutes and go through the project. I'm going to start with the overhead and go through the underground and then the substation and talk about what we're going to be doing next year, what we got accomplished this year and what we're going to go through next year. So with that, I wanted to start...
Howard Barnes has arrived.
Hi, Howard.
Good morning.
Good morning. We are just beginning the summary of what's been done this year.
So I've tried to include a fair amount of picture in this so you can see what was going on during the actual construction. I know most of you have been out on the project site during construction, and it's really tough when we're putting conduit in the ground and we have everything backfilled, and I tell you that, yeah, there's a conduit in this road. It still looks like a road. So hopefully this will help show you guys a little bit of what we did this last season. So next page, Michael. What I'll start with the overhead line. We have two portions of the overhead, the 115 and the 34.5 kV line. On the 115, we have two types of foundations. We have the reinforced concrete pier foundations, and then we have the micro piles.
Michelle, before you go on, I just want to be sure, Michael and Drew, so this is being fed live over the internet now, the imagery and everything?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And also, we've sent this to the people that we know are participating as well. So Bob has got this in physical and Howard data. So.
Yeah, it came over on FTP and it's fine.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you.
There's a little bit of a delay as we've talked about, so
right.
I wanted to make sure Bob had a physical copy of it.
Yeah, so anyone who happens to be watching on the internet, I think there still is a delay between when we change the image here, the slide, and when you'll see the change in the image there. So you just have to bear with that. I think we're working on
I'm down to about 9 seconds.
down to a 9-second delay. So that's a big improvement over a few weeks ago.
Perfect.
Okay.
I don't know if this is helpful or not, but I was looking at it on the FTP. Now that I've looked at it on the website, I'm actually getting nothing on the live stream, just so you know that. Don't need to see it there, but other people might.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Okay, Michelle.
Perfect. So what I have up right now is the 115 line, and so we're starting down at Salt Springs Reservoir, and then this shows it going all the way up to KM Green Substation where the 115 ends. We've indicated the different tower designations, so you'll see numbers starting with 01 down at the bottom and going up to 1/21 by the little green square by KM Green Substation. We use that when we're referring to what construction activities are going on. Those are how the towers are numbered in the plans. And it's really helpful when we're talking back and forth with the design team or PG&E or the contractor, because then we all know exactly, what we're talking about. Currently on the 115, we have one tower that's been constructed, 01, which is the one down by Salt Springs. That was the first structure that was actually excavated, and that's a concrete reinforced drilled pier.
Michelle, when you say the tower's been constructed, you mean the foundation?
The foundation, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, we're only doing foundations at this point.
Thanks.
So 01 has been constructed. The contractor's looking to schedule the concrete pour for that structure probably in about towards the end of next week. As you move up the line, the blue dots are all the micropile locations. Those are all going to be constructed in 2014. The contractor's going to be mobilizing in about May of 2014, or potentially sooner if weather conditions are favorable, and they typically are on that side of the mountain. Let's go ahead and do the next. So here's some pictures of the 115 overhead line construction. You can see we're drilling, the drill rig is down by Salt Springs. That hole took a couple days to drill. We hit some rock. Then we had some sloughing issues, and they had to end up putting a concrete slurry in there to stabilize the hole. Once these holes are drilled, prior to them having the rebar and the anchor bolts put in, they are all plated and protected so that nobody or no animals can fall in. Next slide. This is the 34.5 kV overhead portion of the line. KM Green Substation's down in the lower right-hand corner, and then this goes all the way to Bear River Reservoir. The red dots are all of the direct embed foundations, so those are going to be the holes that don't have a reinforced foundation. The contractor is going to be mobilizing, or they've actually mobilized an auger. They're going to start augering those holes on Monday or Tuesday of next week. They're going to auger down to either solid rock or a depth of 14 feet, which are the two limiting factors when we're doing those excavations. Any hole that is soiled down to 14 feet is not going to be excavated this year because those are very quick holes to excavate, and they want to hold off excavating those right before they set the poles. Those holes can be dug in a matter of hours. The orangey dots up there, those are more reinforced concrete piers, and those are what we're focusing on this year. So there's two down by the substation, structures number 1 and number 2. Those have both been excavated. I say number 2's been excavated. We actually have about 3 inches left to get down to the final elevation. We're in solid bedrock. As with the underground contractor in various aspects of this project, they say this is the hardest bedrock they've ever had to drill through. We are lucky if we get about 6 inches a day in some sections of those holes. So number 2's been a very challenging hole for the contractor to dig. But they should be done with that one today. We have three reinforced concrete piers in the middle. You'll see the yellow numbers in the middle. That's structures 20, 21, and 22. Those have all been drilled. Structure number 22, actually about a half hour ago, they started the concrete pour for that structure. And as soon as the rebar cages come in for 20 and 21, which is anticipated for next week, they'll also pour those foundations.
Those are poured by helicopter?
No, those actually are accessible by concrete truck. So we can drive essentially right to those. They're by the line shack.
There's a line shack up there. There's actually a road that goes right by there.
Right.
Yeah, that's on the kind of on the top of the area there.
Right. So we can get equipment into those. Even when we had the snow a week and a half ago, we were still able to get equipment in. They continued drilling through all of that snow up there. And then at Bear, there's the very last pole on the line is structure number 37. Number 37 was drilled a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. We poured the concrete for that on Wednesday, and so that structure is ready for the tower to be set next spring. We're working with the Forest Service on the access to structures number 36 and 35, which are the next two up from Bear River Reservoir. The contractor has proposed an alternative access to structure 36, which is kind of probably one of the most challenging structures to get to. And the Forest Service got back with me the other day and said they're okay with the way that the contractor wants to do it. It's going to be a little bit intrusive as far as they're going to have to construct a temporary road to get there, but they'll have to restore that road once they're out of there.
Can you tell us where the spotted owl operating period area is
Sure.
on this map?
Pretty much everything you're looking at on this map falls within the spotted owl LOP or the buffer zone around the spotted owl LOP. I was going to mention it later, but I'll go ahead and bring it up right now. We're entering into conversations again with the Forest Service. I've had some preliminary conversations with them earlier this week, and we have a letter that we are drafting off to them right now. Last year, we were able to get authorization from the Forest Service to do construction activities at KM Green and the timber harvest right around the KM Green substation out within the LOP. It's a highly disturbed area, and we're right on the edge of the buffer zone, and the Forest Service biologists felt that our construction activities would not impact the spotted owl in that area. So we're requesting that same consideration this year for that area right around KM Green. We'd like to be able to construct towers 1, 2, and 1/21 as soon as we can. We're hopeful that the Forest Service is going to come to the same conclusion that they came to last year and allow us to do that. We are also requesting that the Forest Service, in addition to looking at the entire LOP, which is kind of our overriding theme on all of our discussions with them, but at a minimum, structures, I have to count backwards, 30 through 37, which are in between Bear River Reservoir and where Coal Creek Road comes up. That's a very active area as far as vehicular traffic in the campgrounds and ATV users, and there's not a lot of really good spotted owl habitat there. There's just not a lot of trees, except right up, kind of where the road is. And so we're asking the Forest Services, again, at a minimum, can we get some relief in that particular area? So if we could have some towers at the bottom and some towers up at the top, especially those towers down at the bottom, many of those direct embeds are probably going to be in a significant amount of rock. And those towers take a little bit longer to drill. The contractor's not able to continue drilling much longer into this season. We want to make sure that we allow them, give them every opportunity to get things drilled next spring. And so that letter's going to go out for review to the Forest Service on Monday, and we hope to have an answer within another week or so.
So of all the tower work, the overhead work, what of the minimum amount that we had discussed over and over again that had to be done this year in order to allow us to finish next year, what percentage of that minimum do you think will be complete by the time they pull off?
We're going to have most of that complete. The big unknown right now is on the direct embeds. We have not knowing which direct embeds are going to be all in soil or which ones are going to be in rock. If most of them are in soil, we feel very good going into next season knowing that they're going to be able to drill those very quickly. If many of them have a significant amount of rock and then we get a lot of weather early on, we're in mid-November now, but if they're unable to drill those this fall, the ones that are in rock, that's going to be a challenge next year because those holes that they're drilling in rock take a significant amount of time, anywhere from 2 days to a week to drill each one of those holes. So that's the big concern right now is on those direct embeds, making sure that we can get as many of them done that have to get done this year.
Drilled. Yeah.
Drilled. The drilled piers, with the exception of structure number 36, with the access, that's kind of the big unknown for the drilled piers. Everything else should be constructed. We have 3 of the holes where the anchor bolts are not going to be delivered until they can't get here until February. And so we have 3 structures in which the anchor bolts will not be set this year, but the rebar cages will be manufactured this winter, and so in the spring they'll be able to install those very quickly.
Up here, it sounds like drilling holes in granite is a pinch point at this stage, true?
Correct.
How many drills do they have?
Currently, they have 2. They've talked about having 2 additional ones on site. If we end up in the situation where they have to drill more holes next year than they originally anticipated, they will bring more drill rigs on site. So they could have at least 4 drill rigs working.
So it makes more sense to wait and do it as a contingency next year as opposed to trying to get the extra 2 on site and working this year?
We've asked them about that because they had originally talked about mobilizing 4 drill rigs this year, which we were very pleased about. They've made the decision to not bring those drill rigs on site and just have 2 drill rigs at this point. When they auger the direct embed holes, they may change that position if they end up having significantly more rock and want to get more things drilled this fall. That's a conversation we're having with them on a weekly basis.
So they'll know through the augering which of the 34, 35 will be in soil and in rock.
Correct. And what that helps also is that if we're in rock, we adjust the foundation depth. And so they don't have to drill down to a 14-foot depth for those poles. They would only be drilling to a 10-foot depth, depending on at what elevation we hit rock.
Mm-hmm.
So we have some flexibility. We're working with the contractor. Every single hole that they're drilling, we know when they're hitting rock, and we're working very closely with Dave and his team, talking on a daily basis. The contractors at this depth, they've hit rock. Do we keep proceeding? Can we ask them to shallow it up? And so I think that process is working very well.
Are we asking for credits as we discussed?
Yes. I talked with the contractor yesterday. We're working right now on coming up with a system for how we account for those structures in which we have them go shallower than we anticipated. Conversely, there are some structures where they've had to go deeper. And when they go deeper, it's not necessarily the digging that is the hard part because they go deeper because they're not in rock, but it ends up being more rebar and more concrete in those structures. So we're right now entering the negotiations with the contractor to see how we account for all of that at the end, because there should be, we need to make sure that it's very fair both to the district and to the contractor on that.
Have there been any either weather or uncontrollable delays, like the potential government shutdown, that provides the contractor with the ability to lengthen the time in which they have to get the work done?
We did have, at the beginning of the contract, we were delayed in getting going, getting the drawings to the contractor through a variety of reasons between design and review and getting comments back from the steel manufacturer. When we've calculated out the time that things have been delayed, there's about 8 days that I'm seeing of potential delays that the contractor could claim.
So that'd be beyond November 1, 2014?
Well, but what we've also noticed is that when we had the government shutdown, and then when we gave the contractor the authorization to proceed, we had about 5 days where they could have been drilling and they weren't. So we're keeping track of all of their activities. They have sent us a letter indicating that there is a notice of potential delay. At this point in the project, we're not willing to grant them any extension of time because we don't know whether there really truly is a delay that's going to have an impact on the project or not. So we look at the days that they're claiming as a delay. We're looking at the days where they could have been working and they had authorization to work, but they chose not to work. And then we're looking at the days that hopefully we can give them within the Spotted Owl LOP, days that they were not counting on having, and give them some days to work on those structures.
They're also working right now, which is beyond when they were anticipated to be working also.
Correct.
I thought they were supposed to go till Thanksgiving.
Their original schedule had them finishing up at the end of October. Their revised schedule has them going through the 22nd or the 26th, but they've already told me they're not working Thanksgiving week. So they're also working, I say they're working 7 days a week. They're actually not working tomorrow and Monday, but they have been working weekends for the past 3 weekends. So even though they have sent us, per the contract, they have to indicate to us whenever they see something that could lead to a potential cost. So they have done that. We have responded and said, great, we acknowledge that, there was some delay. However, You didn't get started at this point when you could have, and we're working with the Forest Service to get you some additional days in the 2014 season.
And the delays would be beyond November 1, 2014? Is that what it would be added to?
Correct. But I'm looking at taking those days and putting them in the middle of the construction season during the Spotted Owl LOP, so prior to August 15th.
Right.
Any other questions on the 34.5?
No, this is clearly the critical
Cross your
stuff.
fingers.
Yeah,
It
this is
is.
where we're on the edge.
It is. All right, next, Michael. Oh, go ahead and go, yeah. So these are just some pictures of the drilling that's going on. This is actually drilling, I believe, structure 20. This was one of the first ones up by the line shack. And this hole went fairly well. We hit some boulders and had to drill through them. And then this is the 34.5 corridor that you can see. Next slide. Here's some examples of some of the equipment that the contractor's using on site. We have a 6-foot diameter drill, the 4-foot diameter drill, and then on the bottom, we talk a lot about the anchor bolts and the rebar cages, and so I wanted to bring you a visual of what those structures actually look like. I should have had a person standing next to them so you could actually see how large these structures are.
Peter could have done those. Why don't you have Peter do that?
He's busy.
Go ahead, next slide. And so this is the view from Peddler Hill. I wanted to provide this because I know there's been a lot of concern about what the corridor is going to look like when we're done. I know exactly where to look in this picture, and probably most of you do. But when you're driving by and when you're looking at that, unless you really know where to look, sometimes it's really tough to see. And the way that the Peddler Hill lookout is oriented, you're oriented away from the power line. And so I think the average traveling public, if they stood there and looked for a while, they'd probably look and see, oh, there's a power line, and it wouldn't, but it's not jumping out at you. It is.
It's just the difference between what's already there and what will be there, right? Okay, that's visually different.
Right.
This is what's,
That's
Right.
that's the
Right.
corridor now. When the towers are there, they're going to be the rusty colored towers, and it's all the non-shiny wires. So certain times of the day, when the sun hits it just right, you'll probably be able to see it. But other than that, you'll probably see the towers as they crest over the hill. Next slide. So we'll go ahead and we'll move on to the underground. We had, I think, a very productive year on the underground. Q&D chose to demobilize on October 30th after we had that bit of snow up here and the ground got pretty saturated. They were to the point for this season of just putting in cabinets and vaults, and they chose not to be out there digging anymore. The soil conditions just weren't favorable. So in 2013, we got all of the direct buried cable installed, and that was one of the big goals, was to get all of that in. That direct buried cable was primarily on Forest Service roads, and we had, what we have noticed over the years is that some of those roads are the last roads to become drivable in the season, so we wanted to make sure we got all of that in so we didn't get stuck having to put that stuff in July. We got about 82,000 linear feet of conduit in, and so in 2014 we have about 51,000 linear feet. In total, we had about 61% of the entire underground portion of the project installed. When I say that 61%, we don't have cable in the ground in the conduit. That's all slated for next year. That's a different crew that's going to be working, and that crew can work concurrently at the same time that the underground crew is installing conduit in other areas. Next slide. So along Bear River Road, we did not install any conduit in Bear River Road, but we did pre-trench a portion from the south end of the dam to where the start of the overhead is. The contractor was concerned about the boulders and the rocks. So when the large trencher was here on site, they went ahead and trenched that and backfilled that. So next season, they'll be able to come in and very easily trench and get the conduit installed there. Next slide. We completed the directional drill under State Route 88 at Bear River Road. That went very quickly and very easily without incident. Next slide. From Peddler Hill to Devil's Garden Ridge, there are two sections, two very small sections that were not completed. It's a little, either my eyes are a little fuzzy or it's a little fuzzy. Up at the very top, there's a number that says 23A, and you'll see there's a red line with kind of a cyan or color around it. That's a very short section in the Caltrans right-of-way that was not completed. And then just further to the right of that, there's a section that starts with the number 26, cabinet 26. That's where we got back down into the Caltrans right-of-way again. What we left this year when we were finishing up was pretty much most anything in the paved areas of the Caltrans right-of-way. So, next slide. From Devil's Garden Ridge to Silver Lake, again, we got most of this section completed. You can see the 26 down in the lower left-hand corner. That's the same section I was referring to. That's the big passing lane by the snow gate that goes over to Maiden's Grave. So that entire section, we saw cut it with the anticipation of being able to construct this year, but we just got too late in the season that we decided not to open it up and have to risk the chance of paving back when there was snow on the ground. Next section. So here's some of the conduit installation in State Route 88. I was really pleased that we were able to get this section done. It allowed us to get out and really try out the traffic control and kind of work some of the bugs out with Caltrans. Caltrans was really phenomenal to work with this year. They were very accommodating, very open to suggestions. So we were able to get this section in. We did have to run 24-hour traffic control because when we put the slurry in, we have to let it set up overnight. That was kind of a challenge because we, again, had flaggers out 24 hours, and we actually had to do nighttime inspections. So we had an inspector who had to go check on the traffic control about every night at about 1 in the morning. But it allowed the contractor to get a lot more done. Next. So the section that we're going to focus on in 2014, other than the Bear River section, is the Silver Lake to Kirkwood. So essentially from the west side of the Silver Lake Bridge all the way to Kirkwood Meadows Drive is going to be installed. And we're mostly in pavement in that whole section, or in road shoulder that whole section. We have one short section where we're outside of the road. But what we saw this year when we were working over by Silver Lake and by Places, that's just going to be kind of a rolling construction zone all the way from the west to east end. And they're going to move west to east. So it'll be nice because as we get closer to Kirkwood, we know the underground project's getting done. Next slide. And so and then the last section that we completed was here in Kirkwood. So we have all of the conduit installed in Kirkwood. We had originally planned, and I had reported to the Capital Projects Committee on Monday, that we were looking at pulling cable here. We were anticipating pulling cable here November 18th. Last week we had some additional conversations with the contractor and their subcontractor, Titan. There were a variety of things that have come into play, one being the sectionalizing cabinets took a really long time to get delivered, but we have those now. The elbows that we need to transition in have not been delivered yet to the subcontractor. The machine that the contractor wanted to use this year is down in Southern California, but he could get it here. What we were hoping to do with the pulls this year was to get an idea of what we're going to experience elsewhere out in the project. The machine that's available this year is not the machine that we'll be using next year. And so all of these factors coupled with the subcontractor who is going to be running the job, his wife is on bed rest and due with their second child on November 18th is the new date. He asked to reschedule to the first week in December. And as the project team, we talked about it, and none of us were comfortable allowing any sort of construction activities to occur after November 22nd. And so we decided to tell them that we were not going to do the cable pulls this year. The information that we hope to gather would have been nice, but he will be using a different machine next year, and he's able to complete them. It's not a time factor, so we feel that we're able to still continue all the work.
In a section like that, you could do the day after the resort closes in April, right?
We could. We have
Yeah.
the cable on hand.
Yeah.
The subcontractor's going to come get the cable. I've already talked with Q&D about scheduling of all of the cable pulls, and I've reiterated to them that I'd like for them to make sure that Titan is ready to work early on in the season and kind of follow them as they're moving these conduit sections. Because I'd really like to get those conduits, the first sections, pulled early in the season so that if we do need to adjust any sort of methodologies, we have time to do that. we're not going to let them wait until the end of July to schedule the polls, thinking that they could get it done in a month, so.
Are the cabinets installed?
The ground sleeves for many of the cabinets are installed. The bottom portions that you'll see sticking up, they stick up
Yeah.
like about 2 inches. None of the tops are installed.
Intentionally?
Intentionally, correct.
But I saw that our staff has put in bollards where the cabinets will go.
Correct, right. We don't want, because the ground sleeves do stick up a little bit, we don't want anybody to push snow or anything onto those ground sleeves,
Yeah.
so. Next.
So as long as Titan gets started at an appropriate time, you don't see risk here?
Yeah, I don't see any, I have no concerns with the underground being able to complete in the time frame that they need, unless we still have snow everywhere in July. They've got a plan, they've got the desire to get it done as quickly. In talking with Q&D, they want to be done as soon as they can. I'll talk about schedule in just a little bit, but they have a very, what I think is a pretty aggressive schedule for next year.
And the whole reason we were going to pull Kirkwood was a learning experience for next year. Now that they're not going to be using the same equipment as they're going to be using next year, the benefits were muted.
So the KM Green substation grading and drainage portion of the project, that was complete. The pad is, the portion of the pad that we wanted to construct this year is done. The access road is done. The site stabilization is done with the exception of one of the slopes. I just need to go up and do a final inspection on it.
And the exception that we got for this year to be able to do this outside the OWL timeframe, I mean, is that automatically for next year, or do we have to request that again for next year?
The way that we wrote the letter and the authorization that was granted allowed for us to do construction activities in 2013 and 2014 in this particular area. Because when we're setting towers, we're going to be using helicopters, we want to make sure that the Forest Service is on board with that. We don't want to do anything that would overstep our bounds with the Forest Service and impact that relationship that we have with them.
But the construction of the structures and the transformer, everything on here can go ahead?
Yes, that's correct. That's not an issue at all.
All right.
And then 2014, the overhead, we're looking at beginning the micropiles on May 1st, or potentially earlier if weather conditions allow. What that does is that one of the challenges why we went from micropiles this fall to micropiles in the spring was helicopter availability. During the fire season, the helicopters are less available. So the sooner we can get it done in the spring, the more likely it is that we're going to be using helicopters kind of in the off-season, and the availability is better. June 1 to July 18th, we're looking at erecting the poles on the 115 line. All the poles are slated for delivery significantly earlier than that, and we'll be coordinating with the steel manufacturer and the overhead contractor to make sure that we get the towers delivered when they want them, but we wanted them manufactured and ready to be delivered early.
Where will they be staged?
They're going to be staged at the marshalling area at Lower Bear River Reservoir. August 1st, we're looking at...
Just related to this, PG&E was doing some of their overhead this year.
PG&E, they got all of their towers erected down at Salt Springs this year.
Okay.
So all 4 of those big towers are done. And I think they actually ran the cable as well.
I believe they did. I believe they strung wire because they had to take an outage. August 1st, we're looking at completing the stringing of the conductor on the 115 line. So next. 34.5 line, again, the way the contract reads right now is starting work on August 15th. We're asking for some relief on that with the Forest Service. The contractor in their current schedule has all of the direct embed foundation excavations completed by August 23rd. That number will change based on what we find with the augering that we're completing this fall. August 25th to September 10th, they're looking to erect the 34.5 steel poles. Again, those are being done by helicopters. That's not something that takes a significant amount of time. They'll have multiple crews setting the towers. And then September 19th, looking at completing the stringing of the conductor on the 35 kV line.
But they have like 25 foundations to do on this, right?
For the direct embeds, they have holes to dig.
Okay.
Those are very, those are not, if we're not in rock, those are very simple excavations to complete. This is the current schedule based on the information that Wilson has provided us. We are expecting an updated schedule in the next week or so, and we'll be revising this based on that. That schedule is going to take into account what we find with the augers, which potentially could push that out a little bit. Next. The underground, KMPUD wants to begin working on Bear River Road on April 1st. They want to complete that work while the road is still closed, because then they don't have as much concerns with traffic control. There's an errant fisherman or two down there, but not a lot of traffic. Once they're complete with Bear, then they're going to move right into the Caltrans right-of-way, looking at hopefully getting the work done by the end of July in the Caltrans right-of-way. At the same time frame they're working in the Caltrans right-of-way, they'll be installing sectionalizing cabinets vaults in the areas that did not get completed this year for those installations, and then also pulling cable. Their completion date is August 31st, and so I believe with the schedule that they've presented, we have more than adequate time for them to complete the underground and account for any fluctuations if we have weather delays or EV days or things like that. So, next. The KM Green substation, we're looking at doing the grounding and the foundation work in June, and then setting the transformers in July. All the transformers, the transformer for the KM Green has been ordered, and it's scheduled for delivery in July 1st through July 18th, I believe, are the delivery dates. And so that is all set in motion. And then having the work at KM Green completed by the end of August of 2014.
So there's no actual building there?
At KM Green?
Yeah.
There is a small building, and that's going to be part of another OFM that we're going to have. It's going to be a prefabbed small building, and Dave will talk a little bit about that when he gives his presentation. Next. KM Blue is pretty much on the same schedule, and KM Blue is a very minor amount of work in the overall scheme of this project, so we haven't gone out to bid for that OFM. That'll be happening soon, and we don't anticipate any issues with that. Next. And then final testing and startup. Right now we have scheduled for October of 2014 to have the PG&E final testing. That will happen once we've all done our initial testing to make sure everything's good. And then we're still on track for a November 1st startup date.
But prior to October, we'd be able to test the 115 into the 34K transformer.
Once the substation is complete, right. But they anticipate having the 115 complete before they start work on the 34.5 even. So.
What is the completion date in our contract with Wilson? I saw September 25th, and Eric referenced November 1st.
I was thinking November 1st, just as the end of the project. but-
August 31st. I'm sorry, not August. October 31st is their completion date.
For the Wilson?
For the Wilson bid, correct. So with that, I wanted to leave you just with this last slide that just shows some of the rock that we've encountered on this project. It has been consistent throughout the overhead, underground, and KM Green substation. So all three of the contractors we've had on site have got to participate in the rock grinding that's gone on. So
I guess we shouldn't be surprised if there's granite in this area.
we shouldn't be.
Is this a presentation something that we can post on the website and make it, for those who would like to download it, downloadable?
Yes, and I've actually put a PDF on the FTP site as well, so those that don't have PowerPoint can actually look at the PDF as well. So we can make that available.
Well, it can simply be posted as a PDF in any case, but... Any questions of this? This is a great report. Thank you so much. It's very informative.
Bob here, I guess I just got to reiterate the point I made earlier, which seems that we've got a critical path item, which is drilling holes in places where we may or may not hit granite, and we've got 2 rigs on site drilling holes where we thought we would originally have 4, and it just seems like we're not hitting it hard at the point of most impact.
The contractor is well aware of the time constraints and the concerns that we have. We do talk with them about this. It's I guess it's kind of a fine line that we have to walk as far as directing the contractor to have the appropriate manpower to complete the project. At this point, the contractor feels that they have adequate time and manpower on site to complete the project within the contract timeframe. We are watching that very carefully. I share your concern, and we are pushing the contractor as well.
So Bob, to that end, we'll be meeting with the contractor on Tuesday, and we'll bring the board's concerns to the contractor's knowledge as well.
I mean, there are implications for these guys missing their schedule, and I don't know if I can quantify it off the top of my head, but we've quantified what the implications are of us missing the schedule, and, you know, them making the decision based on what the bad outcome is for them leaves us and our bad outcome sort of out of the picture, it seems to my mind. Did that make sense? Like, you know, we're gonna face, you know, more financial impact if they don't meet their schedule than them missing their schedule is going to inflict on them. So they might need to be inspired a little bit.
We will do our best at inspiring.
Jeff, you had a question.
I was just trying to, in my own mind, summarize what I think I heard. And there's concerns about the drilling, but essentially we're on schedule. I mean, we're still looking for our target date. Nothing slid off, so we're pleased where we are.
I think the way I would put it, Jeff, is we've lost any slack.
Yeah,
In the schedule, everything has to go well
Right.
from here on in.
but we're guardedly pleased, I guess. At least that's what I'm feeling.
I'm not pleased with the overhead.
Okay.
I'm very pleased with the underground, but I'm not pleased with the overhead.
Okay.
I'm nervous about the overhead. So, and as is Bob, and I think all of us are nervous about the
Yeah,
overhead.
I think the only way to get back some control on the schedule is to be able to do some work earlier than August 15th.
Right.
That's where we should focus,
Yeah.
if we can.
Well, I think that, but also making sure we have maybe 4 drilling rigs on site.
But see, we can't dictate to the contractor how to do his work. That's the problem. All we can do is encourage, inspire, remind him of liquidated damages, remind them of the importance of getting it done, but we can't direct them how to manage their work.
And
Yes.
I guess I'm thinking of the word encourage, not
Yeah.
dictate.
Right.
And by the way, I mean, I don't really want to subtract from your inspiration, but it's been a kind of a chaotic fall. So I'm sitting here thinking, if I were Wilson and you didn't award me the contract till September 30th, and then we had a government meeting when you got Russ approval, I guess, what was it, the 17th, when you gave him the notice to proceed. But still, that's pretty late in the year. And then we had all that chaos with the government shutdown. I'm not sure I would have had more than 2 rigs here.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand.
Well, again, and I share your concern, believe me, I share your concern. Once we have the information from the augers, we will be able to, we'll have a lot more information to be able to take the appropriate action. If we augured those holes and we hit rock at 7 feet in every single one of those holes, we'll be having that conversation with the contractor about how are you going to make this happen and stay within the time frame that we need to meet this, meet the project completion deadline.
Any other questions from the audience? Anyone from the board? It's a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very
I have one more. In the whole project, we have all these owner-furnished materials and their delivery date. Are there any at risk? I mean, all we need is one part not to show up for a month, and
Yeah, it's our fault.
we're hosed.
We had issues with the anchor bolts, and that's why we have 3 of those structures that on the reinforced concrete piers that we're not going to be able to complete this year. We have adjusted, and we have made adjustments with Wilson for that. The big items are the steel towers and the transformers. We are well ahead of the dates that we need to make sure that those are delivered. We've built into the schedule additional time for when that material is going to be delivered to when it's actually going to be needed on the construction site. And Dave and I were just talking the other day about the steel delivery to make sure that there is no delay with the steel delivery. We're coordinating with the contractor as far as the order in which they want things delivered. But the steel poles are set to be delivered in April for the 115 and May for the 34.5. Those aren't needed for about a month and a half to 2 months later. So at this point, we feel that we've taken appropriate action to make sure things are here on time.
I would encourage you to be conservative in having them there ahead of time.
Right.
You know, because if some manufacturer slips and we lose a season, because of that, we're really in trouble.
Yes, it's an interesting project in that any one thing that's missing, like one set of anchor bolts, and we can't finish the project.
And you can, exactly.
It's just as
exactly.
amazing that every point is a critical point. Okay.
Thank you.
Does that
Thank you.
finish
That finishes
8A? Let's move on to, we're going to actually move on to 8B, 8C, 8D, and 8E collectively. Michael will discuss all four of those. These are all procurement agreements for various aspects of KM Green materials and equipment.
The district is now in the process of outfitting the KM Green substation with the necessary equipment. The subject of the substation will be coming before the board consistently over the next several months. And I thought it would be a good idea to have our electrical engineer, Dave Riley, go over the layout and function of the KM Green substation to give the board a level of familiarity and comfort moving forward. I would like to take the next 4 agenda items together. Dave will give his presentation, and then we will address each component of the unfinished material individually. We'll pass out the engineer's recommendations for each of the components, and then look to action for approve individually. So with that, I'll bring up David's PowerPoint and get moving.
So welcome, David. You're on.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'll give Michael here a minute to bring up the PowerPoint.
I'm already there.
Excellent. So thanks for that introduction, Michael. The way I see this is Substations 101. I want to help give the board an overview of the KM Green substation and the components inside the station. I hope that to leave you with a better understanding of how this thing operates, and plus what it will look like. As Michael said, we'll be looking at a potential award for 4 purchase contracts today, and I do want to point out for the KM Green station that there will be 2 more contracts for owner furnished material. One will be the substation steel, and the other one will be the control building. Let's go to the general arrangement slide, the second slide, Michael. This is a bird's eye view of the substation. Just to give you an idea, the perimeter chain link fence, which you can see on this drawing, is 100 feet wide by 170 feet long. You already saw Michelle's photograph of the pad that this will sit on. I'm going to go through some of the individual components during this presentation, but what I want to do is show you kind of the flow of electricity as you're looking down at this station. So beginning at the right side of the picture, you can see the wires coming into the station from the Salt Springs tap. It hits a steel tower, which we call a dead end. In electric power, as most of you are familiar, power is transmitted in 3 phases. This is alternating current is configured in 3 phases. Therefore, you will notice when you're looking at this substation, all the runs of wire, all the pieces of equipment are arranged for 3 connections. But in summary, you can follow the electricity coming from the right side through some GOAP switches and some metering transformer. The electricity is flowing towards the left through the 115 kV breaker. It then hits the transformer there you see in the center of the picture, at which point the voltage of the power is dropped down to 34.5 kV. So now on the left side of the transformer, everything is at a lower voltage. In fact, you can see the wires are allowed to be run closer together because we don't need as much clearance. And after going through the 34.5 kV breaker, and there's some bus arrangements, which you can't really see from this picture, the power then will exit towards the top of the picture to the overhead 34.5 kV line. You'll notice down there in the lower left-hand corner the control building. That's where we will house the protective relays that monitor the power and operate these breakers to protect the equipment and protect the public. Let's go to the next slide, the elevation view, Michael. So this is a typical elevation view section drawing, we call it, that will show you how the equipment is mounted. We produce a series of these drawings of a number of different views of the substation to show the contractor how the equipment is to be installed. This is just where we cropped out and zoomed in on one part of it. The tall structure on the right-hand side is the steel dead end I mentioned that holds the wires coming from Salt Springs. The tall structure on the left side, you couldn't see it very clearly in the general range, but that is a static mast to provide lightning protection for the equipment on the substation side. But this gives you an idea from, if you're standing on the ground looking at the substation from a long axis, what it would look like. Move to the next slide, please. We're going to be talking about some of the equipment that's in this station. I've brought together a couple of different types of voltage transformers. The first one, the CCVTs, those are coupling capacitive voltage transformers. They're used so that we can measure the voltage on the 115 kV side with equipment that is designed to operate at lower voltages, like approximately 110 volts, which you're used to in your wall outlet. So these things measure the voltage on the 115 kV, provide a representative value down below, which is then fed into meters and relays. Another thing these CCVTs will do is allow us to inject and receive power line carrier signals from the power line. The protection of the three-terminal line that is between Salt Springs, Tiger Creek, and KM Green will be handled by communications between these three stations. And that communications will be power line carrier. It's actually radio-type signals that propagate on the power line between the three stations. The CCVTs are a critical part of being able to receive and inject the signal, the power line carrier signal. Another device we'll be trying to purchasing today is a 115 kV wave trap. I didn't include a photograph of that in this presentation, and it is a filter that allows the power line carrier to work reliably between the three stations. Another type of transformer I'm going to show you a photograph of and that we're buying today is a 34.5 kV potential transformer. So it's kind of like a CCVT but made for smaller voltages. And again, it's doing the same thing, providing a representative value of power, of voltage, from the 34.5 down where we can bring it into our system protection equipment. Reading the voltage on this thing and providing it into our relays inside the control building, in addition to allowing us to clear faults when something happens on the 34.5 kV line, it also will allow us to do some fault locating with these relays. We will have a model of the power system built into our computer control relays. We'll be able to see the voltage and the associated current that occurs during a fault, and be able to tell staff approximately where the faulted section of line is on the 34.5 kV. Next slide, a couple of photographs of what we just talked about. There on the left-hand side, you see three CCVTs. Those are 115 kV. You can see the connection at the top. That's where, at the high voltage side. Down below, coming out of the box, is where the secondary connections, which is that secondary voltage I told you we route into the control building. Over on the right-hand side is a 35 kV PT, much smaller, of course, because it's got a much lower voltage. On the right side of that insulator is where the 35 kV connection comes in. Next slide, we'll move along and talk about gang-operated air brake switches, which I frequently call a GOAB. It's a common acronym. We engineers love our acronyms, as you know. Gang-operated air brake switches, like the ones I'm going to show you, are just manually operated disconnect switches. They cannot clear a fault. You can't use them, in the event that the line is faulted. The breakers are used for that. These things are to provide isolation to allow for switching operations and maintenance. The gang operated just simply means that all three phases operate together. We're buying two 115 kV GOAB switches. The first one, which when you looked at the bird's eye view, you can see the two of them. The first one is the one that will actually be under PG&E's control. They will actually have their padlock on it, and it will be their way to isolate the KM Green if they need to. The second one, which is beyond the meter, is the metering transformers, is the one that the district can operate whenever they want to provide a clearance if we needed to work on the breaker or work on the transformer or for any other reason. And then there is a 34.5 kV GOAF switch which we're buying, and that'll give the district the ability to isolate the transformer and the 34.5 kV breaker just to do normal maintenance. Next slide. So here's some pictures of just these devices. On the left is a 115 kV gang operated air brake switch. You see for each phase you see two insulators on the left and then a insulator on the right farther away with a horizontal bar between those. That horizontal bar has a pivot on the left side, and when an operator stands at the base of that steel structure and swings the bar over, it actually pivots all three of those blades up into a vertical position, creating the open switch. The picture on the right is a smaller 34.5 kV. That's a V switch. I didn't have a photograph of the exact horizontal switch we're buying for 34.5, but suffice it to say that the ones we're buying look like the 115 on the left. They go from horizontal to vertical, with much smaller insulators because of the 34.5 kV. Next slide. So now we're going to talk about the 115 kV metering transformers that we're purchasing. Instead of using the CCVTs to meter the power, we have to have a more accurate type of transformer to meter the power. Per the interconnection agreement with PG&E, we are going to meter the power at the 115,000 volt level, and so we're buying these transformers. These will provide the representative signals for our KSO standard meter that we're going to have. Again, very much like a CCVT, measures voltage at the high side and provides a secondary voltage on the low side. The meter will be in the control building. We'll be able to read it, of course, back at the powerhouse, and KSO and our wholesale power supplier and PG&E will also be able to read the meter. But that'll be through our communication system. Going to the next slide, just look at the photograph. There you can see what these look like. There's three of them. The connections, the 115 kV connections are at the top. We bring conduits down from the bottom of these things and then bring our voltage and current values into the control building from there. Next slide, I'd like to start talking about the two breakers we'll be buying. So we need a 115 kV breaker as well as a 34.5. A breaker is the device that can interrupt and isolate equipment during an electrical fault condition. Both of these breakers we've specified in our purchasing are standard SF6 gas breakers. They have a SF6 gas inside of a tank that extinguishes the arc that occurs while the breaker is operating. When we talk about the 115 kV breaker, it will work in tandem with the breakers at Tiger Creek and Salt Springs whenever anything happens on that 115 kV line. And remember, like I said, it's a three-terminal line. It's got all three stations connected together. Then they will be communicating with each other, and all three breakers will be opening to de-energize the line. On the other side of the station, we have our 34.5 kV breaker, and whenever we have any problem on the out valley line, that one will be operating to clear the power off the out valley line. Next slide. Here are some representative photographs. So on the left is a 115 kV breaker. It got the 6 large bushings, 3 on one side, 3 on the other. You can see the control cabinet. In fact, this particular photograph has a little platform up to the cabinet. You're going to see something like that in our station because all our clearances are increased in this substation to design for snow levels. And then the breaker on the right-hand side, bushings are smaller. They don't have to stick out at an angle because the clearance is required for 34.5 kV. You can see a control cabinet there. Next slide, please. So we purchased at the last board meeting. You awarded a contract to Virginia Transformer for the 115 to 34.5 kV transformer. It has a longer lead item, which is why we ordered it a month ago. But let's talk about what it does and what it looks like. As we say, it just basically changes the voltage from one side to the other. 115 kV on the right side, 34.5 kV on the left. When we buy a transformer like this, we get a number of devices and gauges for monitoring. That includes a sudden pressure device that tells us if there's an internal fault inside the transformer. It's a very fast-acting device that allows us to quickly open the breakers and clear the power off the transformer. When the transformer is energized, it is generating heat. It actually takes power just to keep the core inside this transformer at the voltage that it's designed for. Therefore, it'll always be generating some heat. I've had questions about that. It'll be unlikely that there will be any snow accumulation on it at all because it's constantly generating heat. Now, this particular transformer has radiators and fans to dissipate heat during its peak load conditions, which could occur well into the future when we actually get up close to our 10 megawatt peak. Oil goes through these radiators and fans operate to cool the oil off. Transformers do generate low-level noise. This particular transformer, as provided by Virginia Transformer, meets ANSI standards for noise. This one has a 70 dBA noise output at 20 feet. I was asked about that. That is the equivalent of standing on the side. If you were standing on the side of a freeway and a car drove by 25 feet away from you at 65 miles an hour, that is a 77 dBA sound. Radio or TV audio in a room can be 70 dB, depending on this is typical values I've gotten doing some research. And remember that the 70 dBA quoted by Virginia Transformer includes all fans running. Most of the time, those fans are not going to be running, even when Kirkwood is at peak load right now, which is about 2.5 megawatts. This is a transformer that can go up to 10. So there will be a hum of the transformer, but the fans won't be on until in the future when there's been a lot of load expansion at Kirkwood and there's more power on the transformer. Next slide is that's a photograph of a 115 to 34.5 transformer that we, for a project we built in Colorado earlier this year. And ours will look somewhat like that. Next slide is just a description of one other item we're buying is a station service transformer. This is used to provide power into the control building, and for lights, there will be some lights at the substation which we can turn on and off. And then, of course, we've got to heat the building, ventilate the building, and provide the DC power through a battery bank and charger for our relays and for our communications equipment. This is a typical pole-mounted transformer. I didn't provide a photograph, the kind you see up on a pole on an overhead line somewhere in the PG&E system. With that, I've provided my overview. I would be happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the board?
I have one for Dave. This is Bob. The station service transformer, if we had a customer along the route that we wanted to provide service to, that we could legally do it, could we use something like that if they're a low usage?
Yeah, well, the configuration of the station service transformer we're going to have is exactly like the one that would be connected somewhere out on the 34.5 kV line. Yeah, we're just going to connect it inside the substation, but yeah, it would look exactly like that, except we'll be putting an overhead one. Chances are, if a customer wants power, if it's on the underground part of our system, and an agreement can be reached to make that happen, then there are commercially available transformers that could be installed to provide regular house power off the 34.5 line.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Dave, has the substation pad, has that been designed to accommodate snow melt and drainage and runoff and all that stuff?
Yes, it has. RCI designed that with our requirements built in. The actual flat pad itself, where the foundations for this equipment will be installed, has a slight grade to it. So we expect to see a little bit of drainage off the station itself, and then the grading and drainage around the pad was all designed to carry water away from the station.
Bob Endy here. What's the perimeter of this going to be? Is this just chain link fence with razor wire, or what's?
Yes, it is. It's the minimum is 6 feet of chain link with about 18 inches of barbed wire above it that's projecting out at an angle. In this case, we're going to raise that up to our estimated snow accumulation. We've got about 70 years of snow accumulation data from a site fairly close to this, and our fence design will meet National Electrical Safety Code and RUS standards. But yeah, you'll expect to see about a 10-foot chain link fence with a little bit of barbed wire on top.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the snow accumulation bit of it. With a heavy snow year, if somebody's snowmobiling back there, they could come up to the fence, and the fence could look a lot shorter than it would in the summer.
Correct. And then we also have the same issue when we design our clearances above ground for our equipment inside the station. We have to raise everything inside the station for safety of employees that are actually in there working.
Mm-hmm. So my question is, Brandy, do you understand all this stuff?
I'm getting there.
You're getting there, okay.
You can see,
So how subject to vandalism are installations like this that are far off in the woods and in areas that get frequented by people, but not, in an urban setting? It's in a sportsman setting, shall we say?
I mean, this station will be sitting out there by itself. There's a lot of signs around on the fence that warn people that there's high voltages inside. That can help to some degree. There's going to be a lot of monitoring going on of equipment and factors inside the station going back to Brandy at the powerhouse. If the breaker operates, she's going to instantly have an alarm back there. We're also going to bring back some video. There's some fairly inexpensive cameras we can put up, so people will be able to be back at the powerhouse looking at video of a couple of cameras. We'll know about temperature gauges on the transformer. We'll know the oil level of the transformer. We'll know the status of quite a few things. But I've been in this business for 31 years, and I've been involved with many substations in rural areas, and certainly there's a chance for vandalism to occur. Hunters sometimes want to take shots at things. Some people, just want to break stuff up. I don't see it happen very often, but it can happen.
Would it be helpful if we had little signs that were also put up on the fence that indicated that it's being monitored by video?
I like that. Not sure you can read those from the distance at which a .30 caliber rifle can hit a transformer, but
well, if they have one of those telescopic sight things, they'd probably see it. They'd probably put a bullet through that.
It'd be helpful. I think that's a good suggestion, but I don't know why I'm paranoid about this, but I'm paranoid about this.
I've looked at the PG&E 12 kV line there. I've walked the entire thing, and I don't see a lot of places where they've had to replace insulators. Here, where I live in Colorado, sometimes, those insulators make good target practice, I've noticed. And there are some areas where you're more prone to have that happen. It doesn't look like it's happening very much to PG&E, at least on their line. I'm surprised, like their line shack, it's unlocked. There's equipment inside of there. So I think it is remote, but it's going to be well fenced, well signed. But there's no guarantees in this world.
Okay. Any other questions, Michael? Did you have a comment?
two comments. One is David mentioned that all of the equipment was built up for the snow load, and on this shot you can actually see the workman's stairs that lead up to the areas that everything is being elevated. And secondly, the district will be visiting the substation on a monthly basis, and we've actually found that the substation is adjacent to an existing snowmobile trail, which could be a positive and a negative. But it's right, if you take a look at this is the St. Cam Green is actually right around where the C is in Creek. You'll see Coal Creek, and our substation is, pass those down, Peter. Sure. So we're doing contact with the Bear River snowmobile people to actually go out there on a monthly basis and take a look at not only our substation, but this winter, we'd like to patrol the 34K line to take a look at the holes that we've dug, the steel plates and the poles that have been marked. So we will be out there on a normal basis.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? That was a very good, I'm sorry, Alan.
Just a quick one. In a remote location like this, especially in cold climates, do you have problems with critter intrusion in the winters? Animal problems?
Dave, did you hear that?
Yes, I did, and that is a common problem for utilities, and we will be providing, typically the biggest problem is going to be on the lower voltage on the 34/5 side. There are places in which we're going to ask the contractor to do some insulation. It's fairly inexpensive, but it's places where a squirrel or something like that could get up on the breaker or up on the station service transformer. But on the 115, the size of the insulators are such that I've never had experience with any animal-caused outages on that kind of equipment.
Any other questions or comments? Casey?
Just curious, Dave. Just wondering, replacement schedule. If you did have a catastrophic failure with this transformer, what are we looking at?
To get typically a transformer like this, you would actually, if it had that kind of failure, you'd probably have it rewound. You're looking at 4 to 6 months.
And is there a possibility of doing a smaller transformer per phase?
That is done sometimes, and this is a less expensive option to do that than having the 3. And sometimes the utility on very, very large transformers will have 3 single-phase transformers and then have a 4th spare. The design of the entire App Valley always takes into account the fact that the powerhouse is available and is a backup. So that's what's driven a lot of our design. This is a radial line. If any one piece of it goes out, we've got a powerhouse that can back us up temporarily. But I will say that the protection we've got on this transformer, both the lightning arresters plus the sudden pressure device, as well as all our protective relays, operate very, very quickly, and it's rare to see a transformer like this fail.
I had one fail.
Did you?
And that's exactly what we did. We went to 3 smaller per phase. Just curious if you've investigated, what that option or opportunity might allow us in case of failure.
Another possibility, a lot of utilities use mobile substations, mobile transformers, is that we may be able to find someone that actually has a 115 to 34/5 mobile. Usually these things come with multiple voltage taps on either side so that the utility can use it in a number of different cases. And I've also seen smaller transformers that are basically quickly fabricated onto a trailer and quickly pulled into a location. In the event of a failure here, I think we'd be looking for backup transformers while this thing was being rewound, and I think we'd have a good chance of finding something.
So, on that note, Michael, I'd like to put on the agenda, maybe December agenda if possible, or January, just what our planning is for operations and maintenance. I mean, how we're going to maintain this whole system, or what spare parts we might have, to whom we might turn for spares like this for temporary use, et cetera, so that we start to build that plan. I guess now is about the time to start building that plan and getting our resources pulled together.
The staff has done quite a bit of research on this already.
Right.
Pleased to bring it before the board.
Yeah, all good comments and good questions. Any other comments or questions?
Just one here, Bob. An insulator either on the line or at the KM Green station, if one is damaged, what are the implications of that? Does that cause just system outage and you have to put on a new insulator, or is it more serious than that?
No, that's exactly right. If it's damaged enough, the electricity will flash across the insulator down to the bottom of the insulator, which is a grounded point, creating a short circuit. The relays will then operate the breakers and clear the line out. You'll have a dead line, and you'll have to replace that insulator.
Thank you.
Okay, I think it's now time to move on to each one individually. The bids and the estimates, the bids, and the agreements.
So David, we're passing out the engineer's recommendation on the item under Agenda A, or 8B, that would be the trench CCVTs and wave trap.
Is this in the, this is not in the packet, or
This is not in the packet.
does Andy have?
Yeah, Michael's emailed
Okay.
me things, so I'm assuming that's what you sent me this morning.
Yes, sir.
Good.
Thank you. The 7 attachments email.
You're so special, Bob.
So we're looking at the trench CCVT's wave trap letter, Bob.
Okay.
Dave, do you want to go over your recommendation?
Sure. So we, all the equipment went out for bid on October 15th, and we expected bids to be received the 31st. In this case, for this trench equipment, we didn't receive any bids by the 31st. We had been in contact with these vendors and expected to see them. We understand one of them attempted to email one that was too large of a file and didn't follow through. So we issued an addendum and extended the bid deadline to last Wednesday, November 6th. We then received 3 bids. Now this is a specific trench manufacturer part number. So these are basically suppliers or distributors that are finding the same equipment. And you can see the bids we received from Stuart Irby, from Western United Electric Supply Company, and from Wesco. We reviewed the bids, reviewed all the attachments. Irby provided the required RUS signed documents. Irby's proposal met the technical requirements of the specification. Specifically, Irby accepts the liquidated damages. So based on that, we are recommending to staff to award the contract for the trench equipment to Irby for $34,050.
And was your estimate, I'm looking at page 8 of our packet, if I add up the CCVT items, the wave trap item, it comes to about 30,500. Was that your estimate, 30,500?
Yeah,
36,700, that's correct.
Your estimate was 36.7?
Oh, wait, excuse me, no,
it's
I'm adding the wrong number together here. Correct, 30,500 was estimated.
Okay. Any questions or comments on this item?
Based on the engineer's estimate and the bids received, staff recommends following the engineer's recommendation.
Thank you, Michael. Do I have a motion to accept this bid and agreement with Stuart Irby for this CCVT equipment?
Yes, I'll take that motion.
Standish makes that motion.
I'll second it.
And Bob Epstein seconds that motion. All in favor, Standish?
O'Grady, aye.
Bob?
And big eye.
Bob Epstein?
Epstein, aye?
Peter?
Torberg, aye.
And Rickard, aye. So now we move to the one on 6C, which is for the SF6 breaker, the 115 breaker.
Michael, Bob Mendy here. I apologize, and I'm looking through the notes that I've gotten from you, and I'm not sure which one we're referring to. Can you clarify for me?
This is for the 115 breaker.
Sent what time and what's it titled or something? I'm kind of lost. I see the Howard Barnes thing with all the attachments on it.
This was sent earlier. This was not today. This was yesterday when this was yesterday. This is a forward from, for discussion at today's meeting.
Okay, look at it.
If you can't find that, I will go resend it.
What's it titled?
I don't remember what the...
Yeah, so...
Got it, okay. I
Okay.
have it, thank you.
It's the 115 kV breaker with Alstom Grid, ABB, and Siemens as bidders.
Yep.
Yep.
David, did you want to go over your recommendation?
Yes. We received 3 bids for the 115 kV breaker. You can see the bid prices there. In evaluating the bids, confirmed that Alston Grid provided the required RUS signed documents. We asked them to confirm the delivery date. They had given us a standard one. They confirmed that they would meet the delivery dates required in the contract. The only technical issue we had with their breaker was the mounting height of the control cabinet. We asked them to clarify, and they pointed out that they could meet our mounting height. What we needed an accessory, a $685 accessory. By purchasing this accessory, it brings the breaker into technical compliance with our specifications. With that said, when we look at the total adjusted cost, Alston Grid is still the low bid, and we are recommending to staff to award the contract for the 115 kV breaker to Alston Grid for $51,176.
The engineer's estimate was $65,000, and staff concurs with that recommendation.
I have one question about maintenance on this item. So this is the item with the sulfur hexafluoride gas in it, is that right?
Yes.
So that's permanently sealed, or does it ever need to be topped off, or how does that work?
It is sealed, and typically, as long as it doesn't leak, it does not need to be topped off. But gas like that is available, and it can be replaced. And I've seen some that have had small leaks in which you've had to actually top them off, as you describe it.
And how do you know it's leaking?
We have a pressure gauge. We'll actually always know how much gas is in this breaker.
Okay.
Which is radio activated signal to. I mean, this stuff is amazing. Isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And not only that, the breaker itself, in fact, in the event that there's not enough gas pressure, it won't operate. Therefore, we have other schemes in our design to what we call a breaker failure. We have to even plan that one of these things wouldn't operate.
Wow.
It's also the most potent greenhouse gas available.
Great.
Fortunately, there's only a small amount of it in these tanks.
Right.
He's correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Any questions on this item?
No, I move that we accept the bid.
So that was Bob Epstein making the motion. I'll second that. That's Rickard making second. All in favor? Well, Standish?
O'Grady, aye.
Bob Endy?
Endy, aye.
Bob Epstein?
Epstein, aye.
Peter?
Dornberg, aye.
And Rickard, aye. So that agreement is approved. We now move to 6D, which is for the 35 kV breaker.
Thanks.
We received 3 bids for this breaker, the same 3 bidders you saw on the other one. In evaluating these 35 kV breaker bids, Alston Grid could not meet the technical requirements related to the location and orientation of the control cabinet. We asked them to confirm this, which they did. The same problem occurred with the Siemens breaker. This has to do with the fact that we need the control cabinet on the long side of this 35 kV breaker, and that has to do with the fact that the way the steel supports the 35 kV bus and the way we've got to provide stairs and a platform for an operator to come up to this cabinet, it actually has to be on that long side. So neither the Alston Grid nor the Siemens met the technical requirements of the specification. We looked further into the ABB bid. They did confirm that they would meet the exact required delivery schedule we've got in the contract. ABB provided the RUS required signed contracts. Despite the fact that ABB is the highest bid, they're the only one that meets the technical requirements. Our engineer's estimate for this breaker was $50,000. We are recommending to staff to award the contract to ABB for the 35 kV breaker for $46,670.
Staff concurs with that recommendation.
Okay, are there any questions on this item?
I have one, which is how much elevation are we having for each of these pieces of equipment? Is it the same for all of them or different for each?
Dave, did you hear the question, Stan?
The height for control cabinets is the same for all of them. That is a standard design for a typical worker to be able to come up, open a cabinet, and access it. The same thing is true with the switch operator arms for these getting operated switches. You know, a man actually has to come up to the steel and operate this thing. We've increased all of those over standard ground level But there's a number of different clearances that are required in a substation. Control cabinet clearance is just so that a worker can work within the cabinet, but their clearance from the ground level or from the top of the snow level up to the bottom of one of these insulators, that's another clearly defined value.
Okay.
They all depend on the voltage and a lot of other factors. Am I answering your question?
I thought there would be one number based on the amount of snow down there, but it doesn't sound like that's the case. Meaning?
Well, I can tell you that our design for snow accumulation is 5 feet.
Okay.
And that's based on 70 years of data. In other words, everything we've got here, all these different clearances have been added, we've added 5 feet to them.
Great, thank you. That answers the question.
Okay, is there a motion to approve this recommendation to accept the ABB bid?
So moved.
I second.
So that was Standish making the motion and Bob Epstein seconding. Standish.
O'Grady, aye.
Bob, Indy?
Indy, aye.
Bob Epstein?
Epstein, aye?
Peter?
Thornburg, aye?
And Rickard, aye. Okay, so now we move to the last one, which is the instrument transformers and gang-operated switches. Item E, 8E.
In this case, we went out to bid for a number of different items from equipment suppliers. We did this because these kinds of items, the switches and the metering unit transformers, could be provided by a number of different manufacturers. We gave them the opportunity to supply different manufacturers if they met the technical specs. That's why we lumped these things together. We received 2 bids, one from Irby and one from OneSource. You can see the individual price of each item, though we're going to be discussing awarding a single contract to one of these firms. In evaluating Irby's bid, we noted that they took exception to the liquidated damages for all material proposed except for the station service transformer, which is the least expensive item in this package. Delivery of this material is a critical part of the schedule to construct and commission the Cam Green substation. That's the reason to have the liquidated damages. Therefore, we will not recommend awarding the contract to Irby, although they were low. In reviewing OneSource's bid, we confirmed they signed and submitted all the required RUS documents. OneSource did also confirm that they would meet our required delivery date range of the July 1st to July 18th, as is in the other purchase contracts. With one contingency, that is that we issue a purchase order by November 28th, and I don't see any problem doing that, assuming the board awards today. In addition to what we specified for the 138 kV GOAP switch, both the Irby and the OneSource bid prices were increased by an optional ice decoupler. This gives us the capability that we need in the event that we have a lot of ice built up on the switch. With those evaluations completed and our assessment of both proposals, we are recommending to staff that this contract be awarded to OneSource because they did not take issue with the liquidated damages and will meet the delivery dates required for a bid price of $111,800. In the engineer's estimate, all these items summarized came out to $104,000 in our estimate.
140.
140?
140.
Are these listed on page?
Page 9.
Page 9. So that's the group-operated the two group-operated switches, the potential transformer, the 35 kV, and this station service transformer.
And then the combination metering transformer.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. I made a mistake there. I've got a parentheses in the wrong part of my spreadsheet. I agree with Michael, 140.
Based on the engineer's estimate, staff recommends the approval.
Okay, are there any questions on this item? Then I'd like to move that we approve this recommended agreement with OneSource.
Okay, I'll
That
second.
was Rickard. And Bob Epstein has seconded. Standish.
O'Grady, aye.
Bob Endy.
ND, aye.
Bob Epstein.
Epstein, aye?
Delbert, aye?
And Rickard, aye.
So these engineers' estimates, that's what's in our out valley expense forecast?
So overall, roughly, we're $40,000 or $41,000 better than the estimates.
That's what I get.
Yeah. That's good. Great, well, thank you. Does that finish these items, Michael?
That finishes those items.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. That's great. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And Michelle, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Okay, we now move on to item 8F, which is discussion and possible approval of resolution adopting the 10-year financial forecast in support of B8 loan application to Russ. And I think we're going to also discuss G and H, which is approval of resolution requesting the FFB B8 loan application, and also discussion and possible approval of resolution regarding the allocation of property tax revenues to the electric division. We'll discuss all at one time, right?
Yes, thank you. Rena's passing out the underlying assumptions for Howard's presentation along with a final version of Resolution 1315, which addresses the dollar amount for the supplemental loan. At the August 10th board meeting, the board approved a contract with Wilson Construction for the overhead portion of the project. The bids came in significantly over the engineer's estimates due to the difficulty of construction over rugged terrain. The approved Wilson bid of $10.2 million is $5.5 million over the estimate, and with the ITC tax represents a $7.37 million increase. In order to fund this expense, the district has been working with Howard Barnes to put together a 10-year financial forecast which supports a supplemental loan from us in the amount of $8 million. The total amount of this loan would not have to be used. We could use cash contribution instead, and it is based on no district cash contribution towards the project. Howard Barnes is here today to discuss the next three agenda items, and I'll move to your presentation, Howard.
Thanks, Michael. Is the PowerPoint up so we can start?
It's just 1 second.
Okay. Just to let you know, I tried to call in on Skype using the conference number, and I couldn't get in, so I had to use my cell phone. That was the reason for my delay in coming in today.
Okay, we can hear you well, fortunately.
Okay, that's great. I'm on slide 2 after the title slide, and what we're going to cover is a number of topics this morning, including the financial forecast, the assumptions and findings. I will, in addition to a base case forecast that will be presented to RUS with the B8 loan, I will also be discussing 3 additional financial forecast sensitivity cases that were also analyzed. I will present projected retail rates under these, a total of 4 financial forecasts that will be provided to RUS. We'll talk about the request in the B8 loan that Michael indicated in the amount of $8 million. Just to let you know, it came up yesterday in Finance Committee, the identifications of loans are, RUS uses the first letter to identify the sequence of loan. So the A loan would be your first loan, your B loan would be your second. The 8 indicates the type of loan, i.e. FFB loan guarantee. So if questions come up about that, you'll understand the sequencing of loan designations. I'll give you an idea of what the current FFB interest rates are historically and what they are currently. We'll be talking about 3 board resolutions for action today, as Michael indicated. 1 to approve the base case financial forecast, 1 to request a B8 loan, and 3rd, one covering property tax revenues and how they would be allocated. Just as we did with the previous A8 loan, there will be certifications submitted and signed by Eric as president that are identical to those submitted in the A8 loan. They cover debt delinquency, debarment, lobbying, uniform relocations, and tax status. Next slide. This slide is just to give you an idea of the forecast model that's used by RUS borrowers throughout the United States, including Kirkwood, including the input sheets used for data entry. I just thought thought you might be interested in how the model looks as far as entry. It's a large model, and anybody's had any chance to look at it, it's fairly complex, but it gets the job done.
Howard, one question. Who developed this spreadsheet for RUS?
That would be me.
Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Michael. The next slide is the first slide of the underlying assumptions. And what we've used for kilowatt-hour sales is we've used the actual through September 2013. We've used the budget projections for the remainder of calendar year 13 as well as 14. And for years after 14, we're reverting back to the base case load forecast that was utilized in the forecast submitted in the original A8 loan. So RUS will see the same load projections for the years 15 through 22 as what they did with the A8 loan. The second major assumption is we know what the rates are with as it affected September 2013. You know that you took roughly about a 2.2 cent increase in the energy component of rates in September of 2013. Those are used throughout the 10-year forecast as the base rates above which rate increases or decreases will be taken. So that reference point is the rates in effect as they are right now. Item number 3, expense projections. Once again, we use the actual expenses through September 2013, and we used your budget for the balance of 13. Thereafter, we escalated items at 2% with certain adjustments, which I'll talk about some of the adjustments that were needed in certain items. But at 2% was the baseline escalation thereafter. Power cost was adjusted to use Out Valley Power starting at 6.59 cents available November 2014, increased to 6.84 cents in 2015 with REC credits, REC costs as such. Other adjustments that were needed to be made as far as O&M was the powerhouse, when used in the standby mode, has lower O&M costs versus when it's used currently as in a full use basis at the present time. That's about $200,000 difference in O&M costs. There's also PG&E O&M costs of $36,577 per month associated with the Out Valley project once the project is energized and in service. But those are the key assumptions. If you look at the narrative of underlying assumption pages, you'll see a table with how I calculated all the expenses. Next slide. Depreciation expense used RUS prescribes depreciation rates for all plant involved. We did, in fact, though, decrease powerhouse depreciation from 7% to 3.5% effective April 2015. That would be 6 months roughly after energization of the Out Valley project. We've had exploratory discussions, Bob Benson and myself, with Washington to see if they would potentially allow for that, and it may be possible for us to decrease that to 3.5%. Just to give you a point of reference, the earlier A8 loan forecast assumed that we would continue to depreciate at 7% through the year 2020. So when I show you the graphs with the original A8 loan, be aware that we used a higher depreciation rate through the year 2020, where we're now using 3.5 beginning April 2015, and that's a fairly consequential item. The next item, number 5, is RUS prescribes using an interest rate of 5.5% for analysis purposes for any loan funds yet to be advanced. So in the year 2014, we've analyzed it at 2 interest rates to start with, and I'll tell you about another one that's done. We've analyzed it 3.5% and 5.5%. 5.5% is prescribed by RUS. We're hoping that you will be able to advance these funds in the year 2014 at 3.5%. But I will be able to tell you the sensitivity of that here in a moment. The current interest rates as of yesterday, Friday, were 3.42%. That includes the 0.8% administrative fee that FFB adds. I would point out that we're using the 3.5% and 5.5% not just for the new loan, but the $11,025,000 that remains available yet to be advanced from the $50 million A8 loan. So it includes the $11 million plus the proposed $8 million analyzed at 3.5 and 5.5. Just as a point of reference, just to help you remember, the planned additions that have been reflected in the forecast include the original electric acquisition of $2.3 million, Powerhouse of $10.9 million, AMI of rounded to $200,000. Out Valley project is $42.5 million, which includes those initial costs of the exploratory, environmental, et cetera, including IDC. We're currently estimating at $42.5 million. Next slide. As Michael mentioned, there are cost overruns specifically on the 115 kV and 34.5 kV overhead transmission project. The original estimates for these two projects alone was $6.1 million. We're currently going to estimate those at $14.3 million, and that excludes ITC payments to PG&E of $3 million. Michael mentioned the need for an $8 million loan involving Wilson costs and PG&E costs. It should be noted that there are parts of the project that came in lower than what we originally estimated, specifically the underground portion of the project. But in total, there is a need for an $8 million loan. The $8 million would, in fact, fully fund all parts of the project as currently envisioned, with no general funds applied toward any part of the project. Next slide.
If you can wait 1 second.
Sure, I'm sorry.
There was just one little technical difficulty. We're not seeing the slides at this point. While we wait on this, I did have a question.
Sure, Eric.
I guess I wasn't quite sure how we jumped from 6.1 to 14.3 excluding ITCC, because I was expecting more like 6.1 to 10 or 11.
Okay. There are PG&E costs of $685,800 plus PG&E costs of $3.2 million, a total of $3.9 million.
Right.
So those, rather than being allocated to just its own non-identified project, you're aware that your PG&E is assessing you capital costs of $3.9 million. It's on Michelle's spreadsheet where she tracks all of the...
Oh, no, I know. I know that. So is this just shifting where the number shows up, or is it...
Yes. We're having to assume that $3.9 million has to show up in some project because it would not be just as a loan item without an identified project. So we're assessing it, if you will, Eric, toward these two project components.
Okay.
And I have one question. Howard, I just wanted to confirm the approximately 7-cent rate per kilowatt includes the transmission costs?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Very definitely, Bob, including wheeling costs.
Right.
The next slide is on slide number 7.
Yeah, we're still waiting. We're still waiting for the slide, the projector and the computer to sync up. May I suggest that you reboot your computer? Oh, you did. That's not good.
This will be a great time while it's rebooting for any other questions, because I'm trying to move along, because I know you have a long agenda, but I'm more than open to any questions that you have at this point.
Any questions from the audience on so far? From the board members? Any other questions? Okay, we're back.
Great, excellent.
Perfect timing.
Okay, great.
Next
so
slide.
We're on the slide that's items 10, 11, and 12.
Yeah.
Unlike the previous A8 loan forecast, we are reflecting property tax revenues, which we did not when we submitted the A8 loan. We're showing in the year 2000, calendar 13, property taxes of $658,035 being allocated to the electric division for this current calendar year. We've also reflected in future years the provision of $500,000 in property tax revenues to the electric division annually, and in doing so, that would minimize the extent of rate increase represented to our U.S. And at this point, I think I'd like to turn it over to Michael so he could further elaborate.
This is basically to meet tier ratios and to enhance the position of the supplemental loan, how it looks to our U.S. it'll be a board decision each year, of course, how we allocate property taxes.
Is there any conflict with this, between this and I believe we made a provision in our COP that we would
Yeah,
use
that's
property taxes
exactly why it's at 500. I left aside enough money that we did not obligate to the COP loan.
Okay.
Howard?
As a forecast, it's just a forecast. It's not obligating Kirkwood to utilize a specific amount. It's just a representation as to what potentially might be allocated. The board resolution, however, is one that's more definitive, and that's item number 12. A board resolution has been prepared which indicates that it would be the intention of Kirkwood to allocate sufficient property taxes annually to the electric division to meet mortgage covenants. Specifically, it mentions that these property tax revenues would be reflected in account 456 other electric revenues, which becomes part of the total revenues and above-the-line margins, rather than as miscellaneous non-operating income, which is reflected below the line and would be part of non-operating margins. It will be difficult to achieve OTIER and ODSC mortgage covenants if reflected below the line as miscellaneous non-operating income. But in the resolution, we're specifically asking RUS to consider reflecting these in other electric revenues. I am not confident that the accounting people in Washington will allow this. However, should RUS insist on accounting for these as miscellaneous non-operating income, we may ask RUS to evaluate OTIER and ODSC ratios as if these revenues were reflected as other electric revenues. So what I'm saying is, even though you have to do it in a certain accounting ways as far as how RUS would evaluate mortgage compliance, there is the potential that we could argue, just because you have to do this from an accounting perspective, let's consider it in determining OTIER and ODSC as though it was part of revenue. Questions on that specific point?
Any questions from the board? No. And I know the Finance Committee has looked at this and discussed. Yeah. Okay, Howard, we can proceed.
Next slide is number 13. RUS requires, as you recall, margins equal to 5% of the long-term interest expense in order to achieve a times interest earn ratio, or TIER, of 1.05. So if you take the amount of long-term interest, take 5% of that amount, that would require that amount of margins over and above your actual costs. And that is used to determine above, if you fall below a tier of 1.05, it forces rate increases. If you attain a tier above that, the forecast shows rate decreases. So it's the springboard, or the point at which rate increases or decreases are allowed. Kirkwood would have the ability to use these margins to accelerate its repayment of the RUS loan. So it's not as though you generate them and then you can't do anything with these margins. They certainly could be used for, among reasons, to prepay the debt as such.
And does the forecasted rates over time assume that we do repay with that money?
Yes. In fact, the base case forecast, Eric, has exactly done that, is we've assumed that to the extent you were above $500,000 of general funds, that any money over and above $500,000 would be used to accelerate the repayment of the loan. And that would be what would be presented to RUS.
Great.
Good question. The next slide is, I'll try to simplify it for you, but think of where you see the aqua original RUS loan financed at 5.5%, and then you see that purple one, original loan financed at 3%. Those were what we provided to RUS with the A8 loan. So that aqua and the purple. The red and the green are what we're preparing today, or presenting today, with regard to the B8 loan, with a 5.5% interest for advances in 2014, or a 3.5% interest rate in 2014. So red and green are what we have before you today. What you're seeing in the year 2020 actually it's occurring in 2021 on the aqua collar is the depreciation associated with the powerhouse being reduced from 7% to 3.5%, where in the red and green B8 loans, we've decreased depreciation on the powerhouse beginning in April of 2015. We are largely, you can see that the rates largely trail each other, but because of an additional $8 million, the fact that we advanced $38 million at 3.14% rather than 3%, and we have different costs for the overall project, both in the way of capital as well as O&M. There are differences from what we had before, but I thought it would be helpful for you all to have an idea what RUS will see relative to the original A8 loan and what they would see relative to this proposed B8 loan. Point of reference, using the 3.5% interest assumption, the rate increase that would be required in the year 2015 is only 0.9% over and above the existing rates. So the amount of rate increase required in 15, not 14, it would certainly could be covered within your cost of living adjustment that you have authority to do. So if we're able to advance these funds and all costs come in as proposed here, you're largely looking at what you could easily do from existing rates.
And
questions before I go to the next slide?
Maybe the next slide will answer the question, but what do you think the risk is of not being able to decrease the rate of depreciation to 3.5% per year?
I think there's a very strong argument to do that, Eric, just because it will be used in the standby mode. Bob Benson has had discussions with the accounting staff. Initially, they wanted a longer period of operation of the Owl Valley project before allowing it to be used in the standby. But I would have to give that a better than 50-50 chance, maybe about 75% probability that it could be done.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. The next slide is just looking at the B8 loan. RUS would look typically at two additional sensitivities that they like to see analyzed. One, in addition to the 5.5% FFE rate, they would like to see what it would be at 6%, and the 6% sensitivity would be the black line. So black would be 6%, the red would be 5.5%, and the green would be 3.5%. So the differences between black, red, and green is just the delta between FFE rates for all advances in 2014. The purple sensitivity one has 5.5% FFE, but it has one additional component, and that is 5% higher wholesale power costs in all future years. So it uses, and as you see, as it goes further and further out, that becomes the one with the highest rates ultimately in the very far out years of the forecast. Questions on this forecast or this graph?
The green line is the same green line as it was on the last slide.
Yes. Green and red are identical to what they were in the previous slide.
Yep.
I've only added purple and black because RUS would like to see sensitivity on these. The board does not have to act on these forecast sensitivities. They just want you to be aware of what these results would be.
Thank you.
Sure, certainly. Next slide. Using the base case forecast projections, $8 million FFB loan has been determined, and that would cover all capital costs through 2014. It would not apply any use of general funds toward any project. In effect, it allows you to fund potential cost increases should they occur on any of the remaining contracts, and still have loan funds available and have general funds applied to whatever increases that would go above where we currently estimate. I believe that if we submit this loan in November 2013, I would anticipate approval by RUS in the first calendar quarter of 2014, i.e. sometime between January and March of 14. Thereafter, it would be necessary to have execution of mortgage and note documents by the board and legal clearance hopefully that will occur no later than August to September of 2014. This is exactly the process that was used on your A8 loan. So we're anticipating the need for this $8 million roughly in the time frame when you would need these funds in 2014. As before, interest rates will be determined at the time of each advance with options to choose rates as short as 90 days and as long as the fixed long-term rates. Next graph.
Before you leave that one.
Certainly.
So, clearly there's risk of another government shutdown in January or February. And if that happens, I assume that this August, September clearance and approvals would be similarly delayed.
Eric, as Michael knows from previous experience, I usually like to put a little bit of slippage in here. So unlike the Out Valley project schedule, I think there's a little bit of slippage in here that could be done because you now have a faster track to doing loan documents than you did with the A8 loan. You have a track record, you know what the documents are, so I've actually put in what I hope to be a little bit of extra time just in case.
Okay. But should we run into an issue where we can't borrow the money until a little later than that and we need some, I guess what we could do is use some of our own cash initially and then pay ourselves back?
You could also use CFC because you're a member of Cooperative Finance Corporation. You became a member of them. They very easily provide bridge financing if there's an approved, obligated loan from RUS and you just haven't got the loan docs cleared and executed as such. It would be very simple to get a bridge loan from CFC for so long as the A8 loan becomes a B8 loan becomes an approved loan.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. So you have a couple options that maybe weren't as easily exercised when the A8 loan was done. So and I mentioned at the Finance Committee yesterday, I have every confidence that RUS will come through for us for this B8 loan. To not do so would jeopardize the original A8 loan of $50 million to not have enough funds to complete the project. And with minor differences in rates from what the original A8 loan for $8 million, I just think it's for me, it's fairly self-evident that this loan should be approved by RUS.
Okay, thanks.
Next slide is the 51-year history of FFB rates, or Treasury rates, I should say, not FFB, but Treasury rates. And I'm going to, in a series of these next three graphs, what I will show you is shorter periods of time. So this first graph is 51 years of history with both the short-term rates as well as long-term rates. If Michael can go to the next graph, I shorten it to a 13-year period. What you can see in the last 13 years is that starting roughly in about 2008, our short-term rates were very, very low and have stayed fairly low, very, very low, in fact, close to zero. And the long-term rates have seen recently the little uptick that you see there in 13. So 13 years in this graph. The final graph is 7 years. So it just allows you to kind of hone in and look at with a little bit more resolution these Treasury rates. And these are not FFB rates. These are Treasury rates. I'm emphasizing that because I will show you something in a moment. The next slide is what these interest rates were for Treasury and FFB as of last Friday. So what I'm showing you is the first line is Treasury rates. 30-year is 3.71. FFB rate without the extra 8% is 3.29. So you take the 3.29 and add 0.125 to come up with the effective rate. We've talked about this before, but our FFB uses a net present value calculation over the entire yield curve to develop the FFB rate because it's not a constant amount of money being invested, but a declining principal balance. So that's how they come up with FFB rates that are different than Treasury rates. Questions on that component or that aspect itself?
So the only question I have is really more to Standish and Bob Epstein, I think, which is of the remaining amount of the A8 and then this B8, what percentage do you think would be the long 30-year term versus shorter term where we get the lower interest rates?
I'll give you a swag guess, which is 2/3 35-year, 1/3 shorter. And that hasn't been blessed by the Finance Committee, but Howard has a detailed spreadsheet here which shows that in year 5, we have about $8.6 million of excess cash. In year 20, we have a total of $19.6 million. So just as a straw man, and I was going to make this comment anyway, because we're going to have to figure it out. We don't have to figure it out now, but as a board and the Finance Committee, I looked at the spreadsheet and would like to get you thinking about, you see, if you look at that 5-year right now, it's 1.31. That's less than half the 30-year of 3.29. So there's real cost savings for going, if we can afford it, going shorter. And there's no real penalty because you roll it over. It's not like it's due, and if you don't pay it, you're in default. There is interest rate risk because you're rolling it over at that, interest rate environment 5 years from now. But if I were just going to pull something out of the air for the Finance Committee and Board to consider, having looked at Howard's spreadsheet yesterday, and Howard, I know you're not in the business of recommending, borrowing maturities, but I would say I'd probably do maybe $8 million with a 5-year term to take advantage of that 1.31% rate, and then $4 million at 10, $4 million at 15, $4 million at 20. So that would be $20 million of, well, it's long term because it's 20 years, but not super long term as 35 years. And then we have outstanding now, I think, $38 million. So in round numbers, 20 short, 40 long, 2/3 super long, 1/3 short. And again, that's just one person's straw.
Right, but that would keep us, our weighted average of percentages, in the 3 to 3.5%.
Right.
Overall.
And I, Howard, are you finished, or do you want to continue? Would you like to continue?
I'm actually just one or two more slides and I'll be done. Actually, one more slide. So, but no, Stan, your point is well taken, and I think working with the Finance Committee and the Board in in 2014, I think it'll become evident what might be a good strategy. But what you've described certainly has sound merit to it.
Sounds good to me too. Thanks.
Bob here. What's the last date on which we think we would be making a draw against the B8 loan if it's approved, which I'll assume it is, but when's the last time we're going to lock in an interest rate on something we do on the B8 loan?
Michael, do you want to address that?
Well, it really kind of depends on interest rates because we have time in order to pay if we have a low interest rate market, we could do it in the summer of 2014 and just have that funds available for the final payment.
That'd be on the A8. The B8 we won't be able to draw until September maybe.
Right.
Yeah, but point is, it's pretty darn close. It's a year at the most, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the main point is our ability to be below 3.5% in aggregate is pretty strong.
Yeah.
I think we should be shooting below 3.
Yeah, right.
As a goal.
Yeah. So the forecast using 3.5% is conservative.
Right.
And we got kind of whipsawed in September. With that whole rate rise, and then the Fed didn't tighten. So the strategy should be going forward to do the longer draws earlier before there's any risk of interest rate rise. And as we discussed yesterday, and I checked last night, the Fed is on record saying they're going to pin short-term rates to close to zero through 2016. So, draw the longer stuff earlier, as we've been doing.
Great. That's great.
Okay. So there was a lot of numbers that went by here, and I apologize. I'll probably ask several dumb questions in a row. Do we actually expect to have to borrow the $8 million, or do we expect a lower figure because we're going to use property taxes to knock some of that off?
I'll take a stab at that, Bob. You don't need to borrow the all $8 million if, based on your available general funds, you're asking for a maximum loan with no general funds applied.
Right.
So it's not a matter of you having to borrow it. And as Michael indicated, there's no penalty to allow for a portion of that loan to be rescinded.
Yes,
it's just giving you the flexibility of borrowing up to that level.
Very clear. Second question.
Bob, I would just answer that question by saying whichever one gives us lower rates is what we'll do.
Yeah. The $8 million, when we looked at the overhead bid cost overruns, my recollection was it was $5 million. What am I missing between the $5 million and the $8 million in just simple chunks?
Yeah, so the overage on the Wilson bid alone was 5.5.
Right,
And
that's
then if
what
you-
I'm remembering.
And then if you put ITCC on top of that, it's more towards like 7.5.
Got it. Okay, so ITCC is the big closing item in that math. Clear. So in the original A8 loan, did we have general fund?
Yes.
Monies going to the servicing of that debt?
Yes, we did. We assumed $2.4 million. In fact, if you could go to the next slide, it's slide number 16. The original $50 million, it would have been $52 million at that time. We would have funded 52 if no general funds applied, but we applied $2.4 million for a net loan of $50 million.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And we could still do that, obviously, if we choose to.
Yeah, but you're going to want to increase the amount from general funds that you're applying to help service the new $8 million loan also, right?
Well, we could, right? With the assumption here on this slide is that we don't use any general funds at all for any of it.
Yeah, there's a zero there in that column. I got you. Okay, no other dumb questions.
Okay, those are good questions.
I have one comment, which is, could you go back to the first set of multicolor graphs? Yeah, so, Russ requires us to model the 5.5% and some other things, but because of the unique period in which we find ourselves, the operative graphs are the purple and the green. I mean, that's what we're shooting for. And the green is an $8 million supplemental loan, hopefully to cover all our bases at 3.5% interest, and we should be trying to do less than that. So, the higher graphs, and this is for the audience benefits, just so you don't freak out, that's required for us, but we're going for that green one or better. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, and I think when we had our major public discussion about should we go ahead with the Out Valley and should we go ahead with the borrowing and so on, the peak rate I think was something like 63.9 or 63.8 or around 64 cents. Mm-hmm. This is showing a peak rate of about 65 cents. So I don't think that would have changed our decision way back in whenever that was that we made our decision to do that. Alan?
Along the same lines, if we look back at the original $50 million loan application and the modeling at 5.5% interest, even today, if we borrowed all $58 million at the interest rates that we're looking at, our total interest cost for the project will be less than we modeled at the lower price.
All right. Okay, any further questions? I think now, any comments from the audience, questions? That was really good, Howard, as always, thank you. So now I think we need to move back to 8F and consider Resolution 13-14, which is resolution to approve the 10-year financial forecast that's been presented. Bob Epstein.
I have, Howard also wrote the narrative that explains the charts. And
Yes.
I have two questions for him.
Please.
On the narrative, which is relevant to
Okay.
whether we approve the 10-year forecast. So, Howard, on page 2, you say that the powerhouse does 14 kilowatt hours per gallon inclusive of generation and distribution losses, and it's my impression that it's 14 before distribution losses. So, can we just clarify that?
Okay, very well. Point taken.
So I just think I'd like to double check that because I
No, you're absolutely correct.
okay, so I think your comments in there should be, it's 14, that's the gross kilowatts per gallon.
Yeah, current rates assume the new powerhouse will produce 14 kilowatt hours inclusive of generation. So that's what it would be on a generation basis.
Yeah, but it doesn't include distribution losses.
Does not include. Yeah, in other words,
before.
It would have to be a larger figure
Yeah.
if you include losses.
That's right. We can't sell 14 kilowatt hours for a gallon of gas, a gallon of diesel.
Yes.
That's the
Yeah.
gross amount produced. And then my second question for you on the Northern California Power Authority.
Which page is this?
This is on page 3. It implies that we're going to hire them to do the management. And I was just wondering whether that's still the plan. The last I looked, they were unaffordable, and I'm just wondering whether their price has dropped or whether that's accurate.
I actually haven't read this, but.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so for power purchase agreements, we're in the process of interviewing different purveyors, NCPA being one of them, TEA and Shell are being two others that we're
Right.
looking
So I
at.
think probably the proper wording is NCPA or similar
Well, I would just-
provider.
Yeah, well, I'll leave it to you to do that, but I wouldn't assume that it's Northern California Power Authority.
No, or similar.
Well, those others are totally dissimilar.
No, they're not.
TEA is extremely similar, but
Oh, okay.
Shell would be.
Shell would be very different.
Very just.
Yeah.
Could we say NCPA or another organization will be responsible?
Yeah, yeah. So those are the only two things I noticed that
Great.
I thought could be.
Okay. Thanks, Bob.
Okay.
Okay, so now we move to Resolution 13-14, approval of the 10-year financial forecast. Is there any discussions or comments on this resolution as drafted, beyond what's been said? So I think that if the motion is made, we just want to refer to those two minor corrections in the assumptions.
So I'll make the motion to approve Resolution 13-14 with those two changes.
Epstein second.
With those two changes, and is it appropriate to say anything else that staff finds upon reading this?
Sure. Okay, sure. So that was Standish that made the motion, and Bob Epstein seconding. Any comments?
Just one more, and you'll let us know any changes that you find?
Okay, Standish.
Aye. O'Grady, aye.
Bob, Andy?
Andy, aye.
Epstein?
Epstein, aye.
Thornbrook, aye.
And Rickard, aye. So now we go to Resolution 13-15, which is a resolution requesting guaranteed federal financing bank, which is FFB, loan. And I guess just the dollar amounts need to be filled into the resolution?
They are.
Oh, sorry. Okay, and so this is for $8 million, okay, as we've been discussing. Okay, any discussion on this one?
Now I move we adopt Resolution 13-15.
Okay, that was Bob Epstein making the motion. Rickard will second that motion. Standish?
O'Grady, aye.
Bob, Indy?
Andy, aye.
Epstein, aye.
Thornbrook, aye.
And Rickard, aye. I'm just looking to see what else is clipped to this paper. This is just instructions for Rena. I mean, this is not something we have to act on. These are all parcel.
You'll be needing to sign. I just wanted to give the rest of
Okay.
the board the documents that you'll be signing at the end
Okay.
of this meeting.
Okay. And now we go to 13-16, which is 8H, and that's resolution approving the allocation of property taxes to other electric revenues. And this is really what we're saying is it'll be sufficient to meet. So no particular amount is sufficient to meet the tier ratio.
Yeah, and that they would be applied to a specific account.
And they'll be applied to the specific account, 456. Any other questions or discussion on this resolution?
Are we in fact approving the amounts, or are we only approving the methodology, or stating the intent about the methodology we intend to use?
It's the methodology, just sufficient to meet. The 500,000 that was just what's in the forecast. But what we're not approving 500,000, we're just saying that we're committed to allocating sufficient amount so that we meet the tier ratio obligation.
So de facto, we are approving an amount.
No, it could be zero in some years.
Yeah, we don't know what the amount would be.
And the model says that 500,000 is more than we need. And we would choose an amount to maximum, to make the best benefit of rates and cash flow.
Right. Okay.
I think unlike prior operating years, we've now built up reasonable amounts of cash reserves. So we have the flexibility to try to allocate things where they're going to get us the best benefits for the right things.
Right. Okay, may I have a motion?
I hope we have at least the reserves we have now when we're done with this project.
I agree.
Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
I'll make the motion to approve Resolution 1350.
16.
Excuse me, 16.
Nat Standish, Grady. Is there a
Epstein
second?
seconds.
Bob Epstein seconds that motion. Standish?
O'Grady votes aye.
Bob Indy?
Indy, aye.
Epstein, aye.
Delbert, aye.
And Rickard, aye. Okay, good. Thank you, and thank you, Howard. I don't know.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Howard.
Thank you, Howard.
I don't know, is,
Steve Rightly.
Has left the conference.
I was just going to suggest that Dave could leave if he wants to. I guess he did. Okay.
Would it be okay if I drop off? Or do you-
Please, Howard, thank you for
Yeah,
all
thanks a
your
lot,
time.
Howard.
Yeah, thank you so much,
Very
Howard.
nice.
Well, have a
Difficult
good day.
period.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we move on. We
Has
move,
left the conference.
we move on to item 8I, which is discussion and possible approval of retaining a tax attorney and budget expense projection in relation to assisting the district with ITCC tax issues. Michael?
I was just curious, who else is on the conference line?
Bob.
Oh, Bob, of course. Sorry. I was expecting to hear music here any minute. So. Sorry about that. On July 17, 2013, the district entered into a transmission facilities agreement with PG&E, which details the terms and conditions of our interconnection agreement. Part of this agreement establishes the district's liability to pay PG&E's ITCC taxes. The income tax component of contribution, ITCC, is the result of the 1986 Federal Tax Reform Act, which allows PG&E to collect a tax currently at 22% on all electric facilities that are paid for by private parties and then deeded to PG&E. This is charged on all electric services, whether it is a replacement panel for a residential house or a major overhead project like the district's. The Transmission Facilities Agreement calculates the ITCC tax at 22%, which is the 2013 rate, on the work PG&E is performing at Salt Springs, at the substations for $1.1 million, the distribution and design, the substation work, the 115 kV design and review, and on the cost of the 115 kV line being built by the district and then deeded back to PG&E. So it's total combined capital costs of the project. The current estimate for the ITCC tax is $2.9 million. This is based on PG&E costs at 22% in 2013 and then 34% in 2014. The percentage of ITCC tax depends on whether Congress continues on accelerated federal tax depreciation on capital projects as they have done in 2013, resulting in the 22% tax. Should Congress not allow for bonus depreciation, the tax rate would jump to the 34%. As this presentation demonstrates, this is a very complicated subject with many areas open for interpretation. The district has planned and has discussed in the past retaining a tax attorney once we determine PG&E's position and we're further down the road. Questions to be addressed include, should soft costs, including engineering, design review, and project management, performed by PG&E be included in the ITCC amount? Should PG&E's review of the district design of construction work to be deeded be included? In construction work not to be deeded, should that be included? When is the ITCC tax calculated? For the year for which the capital was spent, when PG&E's work is done, or when the line is energized? Our current General Counsel, Dick Shanahan, is recommending a counsel to his firm, Jim Boyd, who has extensive experience in this field and a certified tax law specialist. Mr. Boyd would charge the district a rate of $245 per hour and estimates his time on this project at 20 to 40 hours. Staff recommends the use of Jim Boyd's and Barkowitz, Cronic, and Shanahan, as we already do, hence no retainer agreement is included, for a set amount of $7,500 without further board review. Staff would come back before the board with regular updates and to request additional funds if needed. That is my report.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Are there any questions from the board?
I have two. One is, are we pretty sure we're entitled to the 22% for 2013, or is that?
That's what PG&E has come back and told us.
Told us. Okay.
But I believe that we're not real sure on and that's the reason for getting a tax attorney is to firm up what's been told to us and what our assurances are.
And my second question was, are you proposing a flat fee of $7,500, or is it billed by the hour up to $7,500?
Billed by the hour up to $7,500. I didn't just want to do an open. Right now we have a retainer with Barkowitz, Cronic, Shanahan, but for this project, I wanted to give the board assurances that I wasn't going to spend any more than that without further board authorization.
Well, $245, at least for San Francisco, is pretty good.
The question I have is, why do we think that Mr. Boyd is the right person? I see that obviously he's a tax attorney, right? But I don't see anything in his background that I've looked at that says that he's dealt with utility type taxes and utility industry. And I just don't know where all the little subtleties are, and nuances and tricks of the trade and so on are. And how do we know that he knows where those things are?
Well, I went ahead and interviewed Mr. Boyd based on our further conversations and asked him specifically about his utility experience and his dealings with ITCC tax with other utilities, and he provided extensive references on dealing with this issue individually. So perfect. I feel confident with Mr. Boyd, and so does Dick Shanahan, who we've gotten good advice in the past.
Okay, great. That's what I needed to know. Any further discussion or questions on this matter? Anything from the audience? Do we want to then make a motion and approve the staff's recommendation for retaining James M. Boyd for this tax work?
Yeah, I'd move that we retain Mr. Boyd with the stipulation that Michael is going to cut him off at $7,500 and then review it with the board.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Standish seconds it. So that was Peter making the motion and Standish seconding. Okay, Standish.
O'Grady votes aye.
Bob Endy.
Endy, aye.
Epstein, aye.
Thornbrook, aye.
And Rickard, aye. Item 8J is discussion and possible approval of resolution to adopt renewable energy resources procurement plan. Michael.
Morning.
Hi, Brandy.
Hi. So back in February, we brought before the board the Renewable Portfolio Standard and the requirement to adopt an enforcement plan and a procurement plan to meet these regulations. The board did adopt the enforcement plan back in February, but we were advised by our counsel at Braun Legal to wait until the final regulations were adopted to look into this procurement plan. So this is back before the board today because the final resolution was adopted on October 1st. This regulation requires that we adopt a procurement plan no later than November 30th. There are, if you recall, 3 compliance periods that require us to equal a percentage of our retail electric sales, and this percentage starts at 20% for the period up until 2015 and steps that up gradually to the 33% in 2020. The first compliance period is about to end at the end of this year, and it ran through 2011 through 2013. That is a 20% of retail sales requirement to be equaled by renewable resources. And the second compliance period runs from 2014 through 2016. The one area that we were very interested in knowing is if the Mountain Utilities exemption that allowed Mountain Utilities to meet all of our requirements through the Bucket 3 unbundled RECs would be allowed to be passed on to us as their successor. And Braun Legal did work with staff at the CEC, and that exemption was included in this October 1st regulation. So as we stand right now, the PUD is able to meet all of our requirements, both now as an islanded utility and going forward once we're connected to the grid with the unbundled Bucket 3 RECs. So what is before you today is a relatively simple procurement plan. We're not being held to the requirements that specify how much of each procurement target must be met from which bucket. So the plan before you details the 3 compliance periods. It references the exemption from the content category requirements that Braun Legal was able to work with the CEC staff. And it lays out the percentages and the projected totals of RECs that we will need to purchase to buy or to meet our requirements. So if you look on page 41, we have a couple of tables that show the compliance period 1 and 2 requirements. We're expecting to need to purchase about 3,000 RECs to meet our compliance period 1 target, and about 4,700 to meet the compliance period 2 target. Currently, the market for these RECs is about $1.50, which is up slightly from earlier in the year, but down quite significantly from the beginning of this renewable portfolio standard compliance period 1. So Braun Legal has advised us that we need to purchase more than the requirement for this compliance period 1, since any RECs purchased in future years would not be able to be applied to this compliance period 1. So we have included this.
I understand that last comment.
Since we are unsure what our sales will be in the last couple of months of this year, we need to purchase more than the 3,060 that we're estimating, because any RECs that we do not purchase this year cannot be backwards applied to the first compliance period.
But they can be forward applied.
But they can be forward applied.
So, you ready?
Yes, sir.
So it's staff recommendation that the board approve the attached renewable energy resources procurement plan to the resolution 1317. And furthermore, staff recommends that the board authorize staff to move forward to purchase RECs and consider the purchase not only for the first compliance period, which would be approximately $5,250, but with a market of $1.50, and we've seen these RECs go for $5 to $10, to consider the purchase for the second compliance period. We would recommend an amount of 4,750 RECs at $1.50. That's for $7,000. The total expense would be $12,375 for the purchase of RECs for the next 2 compliance periods.
So through 2016.
Yes, sir.
So I have a couple of questions. One is, I think you have a typo on on our page 40, your page 2, because it says 20% of 2014 retail sales twice. So I'm sure the second one, you meant to say 2016. On compliance period 2. It's the next to the last line there.
You're correct.
Okay.
Sorry. Correct.
So that's one question. The second one is, we're actually, I realize it's a small sum of money, but we are paying an obligation that Mountain Utilities was obligated to do, right? Because they operated for part of this period, and they failed to comply.
This actually, our number for 2011 only includes our
Our
retail
portion?
sales.
Okay, then that's fine.
That,
So they're on their own, and we don't have any liability for their failure to comply. And then, once we're connected to the grid, we can still do the bucket 3?
yes, that is the exemption that was included in the October draft does not have an end date. It does not end when we get connected to the grid. That was something that Brown Legal worked very hard to get worded in there correctly. But it was based on the size of Mountain Utilities in 2010 and their islanded status at that time.
So we don't need to include RECs as part of our power purchase agreement, because we can cover them through Tier 3? Through bucket 3. Well, that's an incredibly generous government.
We sat in a conference call with CEC and Brown Legal. Brown
Okay.
did a tremendous job for it.
Yeah. Well, I have no reason to think that the price is going to go any lower. Right. So,
$1.50.
Well,
yeah,
that's
we
why I
should
was just-
move. Yeah.
I mean, well, it's probably just too much out to 2020, but.
Well, no, yeah.
But my one question is more of a, well, it's not. It's more than just being philosophical. But do the RECs really do anything in the end to generate renewable power or reduce? I mean, it really does somehow helps.
Yeah.
How?
Somebody who's generating renewables had to sell you the credit, right?
That's correct. Each REC is 1 megawatt of renewable power created somewhere. It's not affecting us directly per se, but it is a megawatt of renewable energy.
That's sold as brown power, because we're taking the green credits for it.
I see.
Right. So yes, this is actually power that was produced.
Okay.
That no one's claimed credit for this.
So it basically creates a market for the renewable.
Yeah, it's not very. I mean, yes, it absolutely does.
So what is?
And some utilities provide customers with the ability, if they want to be more than 20%,
Yeah.
they could. And at these prices, if we wanted to allow at some point customers the option to be 100% green power, we could do it for them at very affordable prices.
And what if any relationship is there between these RECs and the auction that I've heard of, that we've talked about here?
But the auction is for greenhouse gas emissions. So, kind of related by different topic.
We are on the auction for November.
And we expect to. Can you? I mean, this is a little off topic, I guess, but explain again the auction and the greenhouse credits. So we need to buy greenhouse credits because we create greenhouse gases.
We do not have to buy greenhouse credits because we are given credits for the first few years by the state of California. We are less than the capped, so we are allowed to sell those credits.
So we have
at the
excess
auction.
credits
So we have
that we're going to
excess
sell. And that's the $50,000 or something that we're hoping to.
40,000, yeah.
$40,000.
But all the utilities were given the estimated allowances they needed to cover the greenhouse gas emissions, with the idea that the investor-owned utilities are primarily selling them and then giving credits back to the customers.
Right.
And so I think it's appropriate that we do the same thing.
Okay.
And that's exactly what board direction has been.
Right.
This credit will go towards the electric.
Is hydroelectric considered?
No.
In a REC?
Large hydro is not considered renewable because you can't create more of it. The small hydro does get renewables credit.
So some of it does.
Yeah, if you put a generator in the stream
Mhm.
and generated it, because that, then you get credit for that, but not for the large dams.
Okay.
And don't ask me to explain
All right, that's-
the logic behind that, but that is the rule.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or comments for Brandy? on
One
this?
other one, remind me, some kilowatts were generated locally. Are we claiming those, or are the customers keeping them? Because we're certainly paying a very fair price for them.
We are, and I asked that question to Braun Legal as well. It turns out that while we are paying them for the RECs and they are ours, they're not certified.
Oh, okay.
And since the price is so low to buy RECs from the market, they didn't advise us. It was something like
Be more expensive to
6
certify.
megawatt hours.
That's right, yeah.
So,
Any other questions or comments
This is great.
from the audience? Anything? Yeah, Brandy, that was a nice explanation. Thank
Yeah.
you. Okay, so I'd like to entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 1317. Let me get the exact wording again, once again.
I so move that we adopt.
1317, whatever the wording is.
Yeah, page 37.
Okay, 1317 is a resolution of the board establishing a renewable energy resources procurement plan pursuant to California State Senate Bill 1X-2.
I'll second that.
Okay, so Epstein made the motion and Dornbrook seconded. Standish?
O'Grady votes aye.
Bob Endy?
Andy, aye.
Epstein, aye?
Dornbrook, aye?
And Rickard, aye. Terrific. Thank you.
We also have a direction on the procurement of the first and second, hopefully.
Oh, sure. Yes, I think I believe the consensus is that you should just go ahead and do up to, the 2 compliance periods.
Thank you very much.
Is there any limit to how far in advance we can buy these?
I know that we could do the first 2. Do you know about the,
I don't know further than that. We can keep in our books the RECs until we retire them, but I don't know if we can go past the second compliance period.
Maybe it's worth a little research on that if the prices are really low now and we have fairly good predictability on our needs, it might make sense to be farther ahead of it even than we are with this action.
Bob, we'll take that on.
Okay, we move to item 8K, preliminary review of draft ordinance adopting developer agreement, connection permit, and related procedures and requirements for new development and construction projects.
As the board,
That's really a thorough document. So go ahead. Who wrote this? I was just curious.
the ordinance?
Yeah.
The ordinance was written by Dick Cheney. So after,
This is,
after a whole bunch of interviews on exactly how the district works, because it's an amazing topic. As the board is aware, district staff and legal counsel have been working to organize our procedures, policies, and forms in regard to the development and construction in the Kirkwood Valley. What is truly surprising is the level and extent of involvement that the district has in nearly every construction project in the valley. In fact, the last project the district did not have involvement in was the new Chair 10 ski patrol shack. And that was actually questionable at first. So we actually had nothing to do with the Chair 10 because it's out of our jurisdiction. What kind of agreement should the district have for each of the many different scenarios? Staff has grouped the 3 different possible situations into 3 main groups. Developer agreements. This is the classic new development scenario where a project comes in, new mains are installed, and then deeded over to the district once the project is complete. The Timber Creek Townhomes is an example of a developer agreement. Connection fees would apply. Permit project. A connection permit project differs from a development project in that no new district facilities or infrastructure are created. This greatly simplifies the process as it eliminates the need for the transfer of ownership of those facilities, easements, performance bonds, and maintenance guarantees, which are all included in the developer agreement. This form is used for nearly all single-family dwellings and minor commercial where a project wants to hook up, create a new service to an existing district facility. Examples of connection permit projects would be the new house up on Palisades, the ticket kiosk, and the K-bar. Connection fees apply. The final plan check project is one that does not involve the building of new district facilities or the additional hookup to the existing district facilities. A new deck, a garage, the remodel of a bathroom are all examples of plan check projects. Current examples include the remodel of the restroom at the Mountain Club and the new garage up on Dangberg. This subject can get extremely confusing, especially when you consider multiple counties. In Alpine, the fire department is responsible for the review inside the structure, while the district is responsible for all outside the structure facilities. While in Amador, the district is responsible for the entire review. In Alpine County, the building department allows for simultaneous review of plans, while in Amador, the district must stamp the plans first before county starts their review process. In order to help clarify the district's position and give our customers a roadmap, the district has come up with a preliminary ordinance which is before you today. We've also developed 3 approvals. All 3 have been approved by the board. Approval agreements, the developer, the connection fee, and the permit fee, to help on this roadmap. Staff would like to distribute this ordinance or related forms to KCP, to Vail, to KCA, and the different contractors and solicit their input. Once the board and community members have had a chance to comment, staff would bring this back to the board for approval at the December 13th board meeting.
So the question I had, and I think you've answered it, because I was thinking that all of this really had to do with water and wastewater, gas, electric. But in fact, the plan check permit also has to do with fire and our obligations to the counties and commitments to the counties and so on to be the source of those fire plan checks.
And snow removal.
And snow removal.
Solid waste. And you'd be amazed,
Yeah.
a property that comes in, we have to approve snow removal storage.
Right.
The counties look to the district to ensure that, if they've got a driveway, that we allow for 1/3 of that square footage as snow removal storage, and that the storage is easy to get to. That you don't have to bucket that snow around the corner and store it off-site. Solid waste, that they have a container, if they have a enclosure, if they have, we have to be involved that they have adequate room for these storage facilities underneath these condominiums. So our level of involvement is incredible.
Yeah, so it goes to all of our services, not just those that involve pipes and conduits and...
But is the plan check new or has the district been plan checking all, for example, single-family construction?
All along. We've been doing these functions and servicing our clients in these fashions since day one. This just memorializes it and puts all these functions into an ordinance and into agreements. We haven't had really good agreements on some of this, and we want to make sure that not only do we have agreements, but we have a way of recapturing our costs, and that these costs are paid for up front rather than trying to squabble with contractors after the fact saying, well, we did a plan check for you, we incurred costs, now you owe us or we're going to not give you service. We'd rather get their money in advance and give them back money saying, this is all it took.
Well, let me ask the question one more time, which is that I did 2 remodels, right? And did my contractor get the plans checked? Scott Beckwith, you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Would my contractor have done that?
He should have.
Yeah, you should
You
have.
can't get a building permit unless the plans that he submits to the county has the PUD
Okay.
stamp on it.
Yeah, so
Okay.
yes. And we work very well with both counties. They keep us in the loop.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, so that was just are there any other questions or comments? So you'll come back after these various entities have a chance to review and comment.
Right, we just wanted to give the community and the board a chance to review before we ask for approval.
Okay. So we move to now item 9, manager reports. General manager report.
Power purchase agreements. District staff has been spending time in meetings and getting up to speed on possible strategies for our future power procurement needs, which will begin on November 1st of 2014. Though it is another detailed subject, staff feels like we are getting a handle on the steps that need to be taken to move forward. We will be presenting an outline of a plan at the planning committee meeting on Tuesday and hope to present this at the December or January board meeting as far as the plan and the steps as far as procuring power off the national grid. Snow removal. The snow removal department has taken center stage of late with staff installing snow stakes and getting the equipment ready for hopefully a big year. In your packet on pages 77 through 79 is a breakdown of the contracts received this year. We are looking at bringing on 2 temporary snow removal workers this year, Morgan Baker, an 8-year veteran, and Craig Schwartz, who will be on his 2nd year. They will make up our swing shift. Day shift will consist of David Waddle, Joe Pellerin, Greg Wallace, with water, wastewater, and electric operators used for snow cycles at reserve. Looking forward to a good, solid snow removal year.
Can I ask you a question on that topic?
Please.
Which is these pages 77 and 78. Actually, it's 2 questions. One is, can you comment on the yellow, meaning the associations that didn't sign up with us and what they did and whether these are losses from prior years, meaning we have less overall business than prior years or how it compares to prior years? And the second question is, on page 78, there's like a whole bunch of individuals. Do we sign contracts with all these individuals?
Yes. Yes,
See,
those are the
East
driveways.
Meadows,
on
the
the-
driveways are automatically included because of our, the nature of the subdivision approval required that. With everyone else, it's individuals. Right.
Exactly. So as far as your first question, 2 contracts, the Lodge at Kirkwood and Caples View, did not renew with the district, and we have lost those. However, it shows Towers Whiskey Run. We did not have that contract last year, so it should actually belong in the lower section. We did pick up the Palisades from last year, which did not sign. So the net difference is about the same between.
Yeah, and the label on this table should be 2013, 2014, right?
Right. And then I think we actually picked up several more individual contracts. So I think overall we're a little bit better than last year.
Yeah, it seems like very similar. It was in the 400,000 last year.
Did I answer your question?
Thank you. Yeah.
Alpine County, Terry was here. Staff updated the Alpine County Board of Supervisors on all district happenings this last week. Due partially to the quality of this presentation, they decided to approve a resolution 2013-44, appointing directors Peter Dornbrook, Robert Epstein, and Eric Rickard for 4 more years on the board, commencing December 6, 2013. And so congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Is that because of the quality of the presentation?
Yeah, as opposed to the quality of the board members. Yeah.
Quantity of presentation.
Yeah.
The next board meeting is scheduled for Friday, December 13th at 3:30, followed by our Christmas party at 6 p.m. A white elephant exchange is planned along with we should be at the Wall Bar once again. So the next meeting agenda will include the election of board officers and committee positions, a recap of the final numbers for the membrane project, a preliminary rates strategy presentation, and a presentation on power reserve. And unless there's any questions for me.
You know, there is one reserve. Well, the question or the thing I want to actually bring up again is the power factor, the harmonics. I think that we were getting equipment to go measure that stuff, and we're going to wait till the lift started operating again or something like that.
Randy, we talked about that in capital projects.
Oh, okay.
Randy, what did you?
We did. The equipment has been ordered. We've ordered 3 census meters that will be permanently installed. Those are being shipped directly to Exponential for programming, and they have not arrived yet. They were expecting them in early November. Once they arrive there and are programmed, Exponential will be assisting us with the installation of those here.
And then we'll start to do the study on harmonics and the power factor.
Yes.
That's it. Okay.
And if there's no other questions for me, Rena has a item for the board.
I just wanted to let you know that Vail has again offered the district season passes at a discounted rate of $209 each. Last year they were at $199. They've extended 2 options for us for this price, the Tahoe Value Pass and the Kirkwood Unrestricted Pass. And we have 26 staff members who will be offered these options. However, we will only be charged for those passes that are actually picked up. This is also extended to our board members. And if you do not want a season pass of those 2 options, we also are offering a cross-country pass at the same price of $199.
Thank you. That's very nice. Okay, thank you. Okay, so that ends.
That concludes the manager's report.
All right, Rick, welcome. Operations report.
Take it out? No, we're all good. Oh, I was trying to avoid this one over here.
Next thing's up the logo.
Just kind of go under. Good morning, sorry for the disaster, potential disaster there. In the board packet is the summer project schedule, and it'll show a lot of completed activities, which we're pleased about. But of course, we're preparing for winter and moving on, and thinking about 2014 and some of the projects there too. But one of the biggest projects, obviously, is the coke membranes. The new membranes have been installed, and they are functioning nicely. We are currently working with the district wastewater engineer, Matt Wheeler, to define some of the warranty issues for compliance, and working with Auburn and Koch to develop a better compliance list, requirements, when tests and different things are required, whether it's monthly, weekly, daily, and still tweaking on some of the programming for running the equipment in the plant. So also thinking about the winter, we're trying to develop a list of the outstanding maintenance issues, whether it's involved with the pneumatic valves for the membrane process itself, which provides air for the membranes, or other related issues. So far we're pretty pleased with everything, and probably will bring back more information through the operations committee meeting, which is, I believe, scheduled for December 10th. And we can give you a better update then on that. As for water for operations, the California Department of Public Health did finally give us the inspection results back, and they did note a few deficiencies, which are on a level of A through E, E being the easiest thing, or just notification. A lot of them were Ds, so they're just near the bottom. Yeah, so we can correct most of those deficiencies. The one C deficiency was making sure that our plant superintendent had a T1 or a D2 certification. So, but we'll be, again, working through operations committee to talk about that, and we'll actually present that report at that time. And then it'll come back up through the board. For snow removal, I think Michael covered it, but we are preparing staff equipment. You'll see snow stakes still going up probably through the weekend and a little bit of next week. So we're wrapping that up. And for other operation activities, the chipping program is complete for this year. Staff was aggressively attacking the extra spools that were left behind, and we've removed all the spools that were empty. You'll notice that bollards did go up along Kirkwood Meadows Drive for the sectionalizing cabinets, and I think we finished filling the bollards up with concrete, and they'll be painted hopefully next week or the week after. And then for the fire department, the volunteers are also preparing for winter. We recently had our ambulance, which is actually owned by Alpine County, serviced down at the county yard and received a new set of chains for that vehicle, as well as about $3,000 worth of EMS supplies to get us through the winter. Again, all these services and funds were Alpine County EMS budgeted funds. And then moving on to fundraising, the district did receive a check from the Alpine County Chamber of Commerce Death Ride, an extra $250 donation check. They balanced their books and they found extra funds because they didn't have an appreciation dinner for the volunteers, and so we were grateful to receive that check. And finally, the 2014 Kirkwood Volunteer Fire Department Barbecue Ad Hoc Committee is going to be scheduled to meet on November 21st, and thanks to Cheryl for putting the agenda together and getting that going. But the meeting will be, again, the November 21st here at the CSB at 3 p.m., and if those who cannot attend, it'll be on a conference call, and be more than happy to solicit extra help this year for that event. So,
We got the question of the fire, of volunteers. Is there anything actively being done to recruit more people to be volunteers? I think we've talked in the past about Kirkwood, the resort employees, and how employees sometimes just benefit from having the training, and then that's something in their resume, and it's something that is a good thing for them once they understand what it is. Is there anything that's being done to recruit more volunteers?
historically, we've had an opportunity to attend and set up a table at the resorts, job fairs. This year, we had real late notice. We weren't able to do that. However, the word is out, and will be something that came up in staff meeting. I think Kelly brought this up, is we should post some flyers up in some of the employee housing units. I know my volunteers actively go out, seek the employees that are starting to show up to become volunteers for the fire department. So we'll be hitting the pavement and talking to a lot more folks, but I think posting the flyers will help us out quite a bit as well.
Maybe even just a little event of some sort, you know. I mean, it's just a suggestion, but I mean, you know, a recruiting lunch or something, you know, just to, so there's an opportunity to talk to people and have the current volunteers say what they get out of it from participation. Something that's a little bit more active, I guess.
That's an excellent idea, and we could definitely host an open house during one of our drill nights and advertise that. That'd be great.
They're currently going through their training processes now for each of the different departments, so I'll reach out to Casey and see if we could be invited to some of those where a volunteer could talk to their new hires. I think there's one going on actually today.
Great, thanks.
Other than that, we're just getting ready for winter, and unless there's any questions from the board, concludes my report.
Anything else for Rick? Great, thanks, Rick. Really appreciate it. Congratulations on the membrane project, too, getting that one about done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're excited for it. Be careful. I know.
Brandy, electric and propane systems.
Hi. So I'd like to start with the powerhouse update of the generators. As you know, we had been struggling with some fuel issues with the Volvos over the summer, and PowerSecure was able to complete the Volvo fuel work on October 25th. Since then, we've been able to run the Volvos during regular operation. The fuel pressures have been fine. We have not seen any additional problems. So our confidence is at a higher level to run the Volvos now. We did complete that project with a new filter system on the day tank that the Volvos run off of, new fuel hoses, a new fuel pump, canisters, and we started with an enzyme treatment to prevent any fungus or algae growth in the fuel. So we believe that the problem resulted from the lack of pre-filtering before the fuel meters that have a mechanical wheel that measures flow rate, and the potential for contaminated fuel. So we think we have that under control. The Volvos are back up and running, and the cats are doing good as well. We did have an oil leak on number 2 that was recently repaired. Number 2 is back up and running, but we do have a minor issue on number 2. We have a sensor that is reporting an air filter restriction on number 2. It's not stopping us from running it. It's just a nuisance alarm. That Holt will be back up on Tuesday to replace that sensor. So we are in good shape as far as our generators go, which is good because snowmaking is operational as long as temperatures allow. We did start making snow on November 3rd, and it continued for a little over 24 hours before the temperatures got too warm. So during that short run, we did see 700 to 1,200 kilowatts higher than our baseline production, and our peak for snowmaking so far was at 1,900 kilowatts in the evening of November 4th. We are also buttoning things up for the winter. The Q&D lot has been cleared. The powerhouse dirt room has been emptied and then refilled with things like spools, and looking forward to a good winter season.
Have you been able to generate the reports on efficiency for the, I can't remember the last time I saw it, if it was 2 months ago or a month ago.
Right.
But
And I have not. I have not. We've been doing our weekly reports.
No, yeah, she's does them weekly.
okay.
But
Yeah, we
I
haven't
don't
done
have
we haven't combined them together and given them to the.
Okay. But any red flags, or is it going along pretty well?
Once the Volvos were operational, we were seeing low 13s, possibly high 12s when we were just running the cats over the summer. Once the Volvos have been back online, we're back up into the mid 13s range. But I haven't done a long average for that, and I apologize. I can do that.
Do you think it's possible to get up into the 14s? Or are we basically peaking on efficiency?
Oh, no, I believe that we can get into the 14s, but we need the summer to average out our winters. Because the problem with the Volvos this last year is that the summers is when we were supposed to be saving all this, having the efficiency of only running the two Volvos, and we've been running a cat because the Volvos are down with this fuel issue. So I believe that if we had a summer of Volvo running, we could minimize or average out the year long.
Have we ever hit 14? In any?
Sure.
We have.
We've had a week just recently where we hit 14. So
Okay.
we have, yeah.
Okay. Great. Any other questions of Brandy?
I have to also mention that we cleared out the Red Cliffs middle lot that we used as a staging area, removed the fence, and they Q&D regraded it, and Vail has been thrilled with the end product, and we look good to renew that relationship next year. So,
Thank you. Okay. Kelly.
Okay. So, to go on to September financials, starting with the balance sheet, there are a couple of changes to that. You'll notice that there is a new line for the COP reserve fund. We broke that out to its own separate line so that it didn't skew any of the budget numbers due to the fact that this reserve fund doesn't have a budget per se. You'll also notice that the trustee special construction account is considerably higher than budget, and that is due to the fact that we have drawn more than we budgeted for. We just drew earlier than we expected we would on those funds.
So I know we've covered this before, so I feel a little stupid not remembering exactly, but the reserve line, which is 3.2 million right now, that's what we originally called the debt stabilization fund. Debt stabilization, I wish. Rate stabilization fund.
Yes, sir.
That's a combination of the rate stabilization funds and a reimbursement of previous electric study costs the district received with the...
Right, but basically we can use that however we wish.
Yes, it's undesignated.
It's just that we are not designating it as our general operating, that the $2 million, if that's our goal to keep in general operating reserves, this is separate from that. So this is something that once we get through the construction period and we understand really where we are, we really could use, if we wanted to stabilize rates if something weird happens and so on, if we wanted to. Yeah. Okay.
Well, a good use of that might be to take $500,000 and add it to operating cash, which is projected to be a low of $1.5 million in December,
right,
and use the other 2.7 instead of borrowing from the government.
Right.
For example.
For example. Yeah. Good. Thanks.
Also, you'll notice that the capital reserve is sitting at $591,000 over budget, and this is mainly due to the fact that the membrane replacement project, we haven't paid all of those invoices yet, and we are paying from that capital reserve. We did get a new invoice for them that was paid out in November, so as we pay off that project, that will align more with budget, what we have expended for capital reserve. Moving down to liabilities, you'll notice that accounts payable is 1.5 million over budget, and this is mainly due to the fact that we had Out Valley invoices that were paid in October. The bulk of that over budget is Out Valley expenses. Also, you'll notice the accrued interest payable is showing a negative number, and this is due to the fact that we made our quarterly RUS interest payment in September, and that included the September accrual. And we have a semi-annual interest payment for our COP that pays us through December of 2013. So that shows negative because of that. It's a prepayment, sort of. And our budget didn't account for that. Our budget accounted for a monthly amount. That is all I have for the balance sheet, unless you have any other questions. No? On to the combined income statement. Again, we've had a change to this. You'll notice that there is a new line under operating revenues called Other Sales to Public Authorities, which is a RUS required account. Basically, that is our interfund electric use. We used to put it towards the KMPUD internal usage line, but RUS requires us to put that against other sales to public authorities. Overall operating revenues for the month are over by $24,000, which is a good thing. Moving down to our expenses, you'll notice that diesel cost of goods sold is over budget. Just a note that $23,500 of this amount is due to the final payment that we made to Power Secure. Last year, in June 30th, we made a payment to them that included a credit to diesel cost of goods sold. We underpaid them, and so this credit was then offset by this $23,500. Also, you'll notice that payroll taxes and employee benefits are over budget as well.
but this has been corrected in October. We are now posting not only salaries and wages, but employee benefits and taxes to work-in-progress accounts. The correction, the total correction for July through September was $28,000. So if you move along to the side there to see our $31,000 over budget for the year for employee benefits and taxes, $28,000 of that is going away. It's going to posted to the work-in-progress accounts. So that's a good thing as well, that we are now posting those, and it will happen on a monthly basis from now on. You'll also notice that in the G&A allocations line, now we are allocating property taxes on a monthly basis as opposed to at the end of the year. So the way that we move those property taxes through is through a G&A allocation. So that directly corresponds to that other non-operating revenue number below the operating expenses line. And that's just how we move those property taxes through the income statement. That is all I have on the combined income.
So should I sort of take away from this discussion that versus what we're looking at and actually here, once our budgeting and everything is adjusted to map to how you're starting to do things like monthly and so on, I mean, if our budget had anticipated that, then our numbers would be looking pretty good right now, it seems to me.
Yes.
I mean, instead of being $37,000 worse than budget overall, we'd be probably positive.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm trying to make myself feel good here. That's it. Well, you know, I'm getting there.
I think we are overall. I think we're seeing a good year so far. I think that we have a handle on expenses. We're really paying attention to what we're spending and how we're spending.
July and September revenues are both over what we had anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
In August, I think it was below. But so early in the year, it seems like it's going along pretty well.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
So then moving on to water. We move on to the water income statement. The biggest thing I wanted to point out on that one was an overage in operations and maintenance costs, and this was due to the final payment made to Don Klein to close out the Dangberg water tank removal. Overall, water for the month, we were over budget by $1,764 in operating expenses. For the year, though, we are doing better than expected by $3,444 in operating expenses, and bottom line for the year, $3,666. So water is doing good for the year. On to wastewater. The biggest note in wastewater is the depreciation is considerably down from budget, and this is due to the fact that the budget accounts for the depreciation of the new membrane project, which we have not actually begun to depreciate yet, as that project is just now coming to a close. It's about a $6,000 a month difference. So once, I believe we'll start depreciating that in November, and the numbers will catch up at that point once we actually start depreciating that project. And also internal allocations, which is the internal electric use. We've been over budget for the year so far for our internal electric use, which is one of the main things there.
The new rates have not taken effect yet, right?
Not until November 1st. So in November, we'll see those new rates. On to electric now. Some of the bigger notes in electric, again, employee benefits and taxes have been over for the year, but due to this new of posting of the work in progress, posting employee benefits and taxes to the work in progress accounts. We are made a total correction for July through September of $17,214. So that's going to help that number considerably for the year. Again, that was posted to October, so you'll see that reflected in the October numbers. And also, contract services are over budget, and this is due to a special assessment by the Northern California Joint Pole Association, as well as exponential engineering help with the power quality study. And that is all I have for electric. And then on to snow removal, just a quick note, which we've mentioned last month as well, that the operations and maintenance are over budget in snow removal due to that transmission rebuild. We will start posting revenue in snow removal starting November, so that will help with that number once we start actually posting our revenue for that. And then propane notes, cost of goods sold in propane were over for the month, but that's due to the fact that revenues were also over for the month in propane by $4,700, so they directly relate to each other. If we consume more, then our cost of goods sold will go up from that. Also, salaries and wages and benefits and taxes are up in propane as well, and this was due to the amount of employee time spent on the leak projects that we had going this summer. Also, one other note in propane, operations and maintenance is up due to main tank leak repairs, and there was also liquid line damage done when they were installing the Met Tower. There was a $3,500 invoice that is actually going to get moved to the Met Tower work in progress account. It's in propane right now, but that will be corrected for next month. And that is all I have on the income statements, unless anybody has any questions on those. Nope. And I have an updated cash waterfall for everyone.
That's the one you emailed out earlier today.
That's correct. Okay, you will notice that ending October, we our operating cash, unencumbered operating cash was at $2,023,000, which was $29,000 better than planned. You'll also notice that in our forecast, our lowest unencumbered cash point will be at the end of December at $1.4 million, but then we build back up through the rest. 1.496, yes, $1.5 million. But then again, we do start to build back up through the winter months for unencumbered cash. And I've added and updated the forecasts so that we can compare and make sure that we're not so far off in our forecasts, and you can see that there's not that much of a fluctuation between the months. So we know that our forecast is pretty solid, and that's something that we're going to focus on, making sure that that forecast is as accurate as possible.
Great.
That's all I have.
Wonderful. Good job. Thanks.
Thank you.
I just will comment, I'm sort of a fanatic about these cash flow waterfalls, just because I work with a lot of small businesses, and this is essentially a small business. So this is more stable than most of my small businesses. And, there are small businesses that waterfall everything, revenue, expenses, blah, blah, blah. But I always just try to do it on cash. And this is, in my opinion, very good performance. Because, if you look at your low point variability, it fluctuates, but, we're $1 or maybe it's $1,000 off of budget in December. And, similarly, what troubled me to begin with was that the June 13 ending cash was 2.8, we came in at 2.3, but because of the subsequent performance, that has to all be just a timing thing.
Yeah.
And then finally, we're sort of hovering around ending the year at 3.2, which is pretty much dead nuts on in terms of the budget, and it's also $1 million more than we finished last year with. So this is a very good job.
Yeah, it is a very good job. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go on to committee reports. Communications, Bob.
Okay, so I just want to spend a couple minutes here and walk you through the new website that we're developing and talk about that a little bit. So the goal here is to provide 2 new services for customers. One is all prior bills would be online, including the current month, as well as all active meter information for any meters for which we're doing radio reads, real-time radio reads. So our plan is to roll this out in 3 phases. What I'm going to show you today is the first phase, which is functionally almost complete, but we haven't loaded the data yet. We'll do that this week. And the plan there is that would go live at the end of this month. And I would encourage board members to take a look at it beforehand on the development side if you like. And then the next phase would be asking customers to sign up for electronic bill presentment. And presumably they would do that in December, along with being able to enjoy looking at their real-time meter reads. For people that enjoy that, it will be available. And then beginning the January 1st bills that would represent December, then those would go out in the new format in the new system. And then in the first quarter of 2014, we would do the alert system, which I'll talk about in a second. So I just did screenshots. We did a demo yesterday. So you can see I logged in to the site and on the account. And Bob, I emailed you these.
Yeah, I'm looking at
okay.
them. Thanks.
So on page 1, so we have my profile, any billing statements, and the meter. So if you go to the next slide, I clicked on viewing my statements. And we allow an unlimited number of accounts to be linked to your email. So if you have more than one, you have to choose one. So if you go down to the next one, I happen to choose 34180 Yarrow Place, which I don't actually own, but hopefully Sean will be won't mind the fact. So this is what it would look like. I loaded 6 months worth of data, so you would see the amount due and the current charges for those bills. In fact, you would see the last 18 months. We'll go back to May of 2012. And you also see there that you're enrolled to get statements by email. If you want to change that, you can do it. So if you click on the view bill, and we go to the next one, Michael, then this is the format of the new bill. I actually used mine because I didn't think Sean wanted me to show his bill. So I used mine from May. The major changes on the bill, besides the extensive use of lowercase letters where appropriate, is a nicer quality presentation and more information, starting with the summary of charges, which you see in the second block. We summarize the total amount that electricity cost. Right now in your current bill, you could only find that by adding everything up. So we do that for each item. So if you just look at the summary, you know what they all are. The next section, the service details, is similar to the current bill. It just breaks them all down to show where everything came from. And then the new feature down at the bottom there is daily usage. And that'll show you the current period, both the total amount and the amount per day, as well as a previous year if it's available. So I picked May because I happen to have both of mine, so that way you can see that, I was 5.58 per day in May of 2012 and 4.24 in this year's May period. So that gives you an idea of what the bill looks like for it. And so it meets all of the customer requests from the survey for improvements to the bill. And so moving on, the next thing I clicked on, going down to the next page, Michael, is my meter information. So this shows for the 3 accounts that I registered. And by the way you register is you identify it from a list, and then you enter in the account number associated with that. So you have to know that to get in. So that's the security. So this shows me that I've got 3 meters available to read for my Glove Rock account, 3 in the Yarrow Place, and only an electric meter on Kirkwood Meadows Drive. So if I clicked on electric meter for Yarrow Place, what I would then see is this is the actual usage recorded for that day. And the reason why it's spotty is you either use a kilowatt or you don't. So the resolution is 8 kilowatts. You can see this is probably a home that has a refrigerator and not much else going on. So there's a kilowatt that happens, about every 4 hours for a total consumption of 6. But you'd see all of that. You also can see it on an hourly basis, is what this is, or a weekly basis. But they only gave me 1 day's worth of data. A weekly would show you Sunday through Saturday how much is used each day. Monthly would show you every day of the month, and then yearly would show you each month. And you can go in the prior months or whatever you want. And this is all real time. We'll get meter reads once an hour for electric and propane. That should start up this week. And then we'll get water once we switch to new meters. And so that will all be, we should be in good shape to do this by the end of this month. So you'd be able to see it in real time. I'm hoping that will attract people to the site so they'll sign up to get people started, because this is at least something new. Looking at your previous bills probably isn't as exciting, but this would do things. The next phase that we would do with this data is to do analysis so we can try to detect unusual patterns, and then customers will be able to sign up for notification. So an unusual pattern, might be a lot of water use in the middle of the night. Right? I mean, it's unlikely, but someone could show up at 1 a.m. and fill their hot tub. So we will figure out a bunch of patterns, and then customers can tune it to what actually works for their specific location. And that's a work to be done, but we'll have the tools to do it, and we're pretty confident we can figure out some reasonable things that we can then adjust. Of course, staff will be notified if something seems unusual. Then we can consider it as a possibility of a leak, and then take action based on what the customer allows us to do.
The water meter work will be done next year.
I'll let Michael comment.
Yeah, we'll be doing, Jim Henry will be up on Thursday of next week. We're going to have about 50 units done this month. So we'll have 50 of the 700 or so. So we can start a testing process of the different parameters. One of the parameters would be not only large water usage, but continual small amounts of water usage. Like, 12 hours you're using 10 cubic foot or whatever it might be. That's going to, be like a leaky toilet. Could be a continual water usage. So, and then after we get this tested and figured out, then we'll start doing the commercial projects, because we'll have access during the winter, and then we'll start doing the residential projects in the spring of next year.
Okay, the next slide is an example of net metering, if I remember correctly. Oh, no, I'm sorry. So if I did want to sign up for another service, this is the My Profile page. So this shows that, there's 3 accounts registered to my email address. Now, in the case of Vail, they have 40 or 50 accounts, and that's not very usable. So we're going to meet with them and offer them their own custom page to do it, in the goal of trying to get them off of paper statements. Our fundamental goals are to eliminate the paper statements wherever we can, provide a higher degree of customer service and more accurate billing, and ultimately less staff time involved in managing customer questions about billing. So you can see this is the current site, the contact information, that's already available. And if you slide down, the new area that we've expanded, and we may want to move these things around, just go a little bit further. There's my list of properties. I could add a property there if I want to, and then right at the bottom there is how do you want statement notification? Do you want an email or mail or both? You'll be able to choose how you want that to work, and there'll probably be a few other options behind there. We will preload. There's about 150 customers that have already indicated they want it by email, so we'll start out with them in that regard. And then the next page, we talked about net metering. So Algraph happens to be on net metering. So this is his new revised bill for October. So if you slide down, it's the same as my bill, but there's a new section for him called net metering. So for that, you see for each month, so for July, the meter ran into his house for 64 kilowatt hours. It ran out of his house to us for 250. So his net was minus 186. Our rate in that month was 0.5942 cents. So therefore, we owe him $110.54 for that month. Our 3 net metering customers will see this for each month of the year. And then a total year to date is the sum of what would have happened if we trued up on that day. But in fact, we true up in July. And so that amount, if it's negative, they can either get a credit or a check. If it's positive, then we would bill them at that point. So the net metering will be part of this, and it'll be accurate, and we can eliminate the manual spreadsheets when that's done. So we should improve customer satisfaction for our net metering customers. So I mentioned the last phase is we're going to replace the one call stuff next year, so customers can sign up for either a text message, an email, or a computerized voice that will read the text message into their answering machine. And then for whatever types of services they want. And we would expect that to be less cost than our current service. So presumably by March, that would be completely done. It might be January, but we're prioritizing the other stuff first. So that's where we are. Happy to take any questions on this.
Yeah, staff has been meeting with Bob on a weekly basis, and I think customer service is thrilled with the new functionalities.
This is extremely good stuff, extremely good. Bob, you said you were going to try to set up some inducements to people to use electronic bill presentment. Is that built into this? You didn't mention it, I don't think, but...
Well, we decided to be, we could do a little bit of strong arming. What we decided instead is that most people probably want the ability to look at their meter information, because it's really handy. If you want to know if you left the heater on, it's really easy to tell, or if you left the lights on. So
you can do that whether or not you got electric bill.
Yeah, so by
electronic bill presentments.
That's right. So by by making a priority for that, excuse me, ready for lunch. We think people will sign up electronically. Once they're signed up electronically and they see the bills and the rest of that, we think we can, entice them to do it just because it's convenient. But we don't want to, if somebody really wants a printed bill, we're not going to charge them extra or try to talk them out of it unless their last name starts with SAP. So I'm working on Alan by making something that's so good he can't resist. But I'm not there yet, but I have my hopes.
Okay, Bob, thanks.
Okay.
Bob, into planning.
Yeah, planning actually did not meet since the last board meeting, so relatively little to mention there. Michael talked about the power purchase agreement and how we expect that to come forward in the next board meeting or possibly the one thereafter. Cheryl Stern did some additional work on the Trails project, putting that proposal before TriTac to start building awareness. I think that was a good move early in the game. And lastly, on Mello-Roos, 2 things that we're waiting to close there. One is we are awaiting Vail signal that they are ready to sign the RMA as it now exists after many negotiation iterations. And we're sort of, considering that a prerequisite to any of the subsequent steps. And we are also awaiting KCP concurrence on the cash collateral requirements that KMPUD has specified. So I think those are the key points now, and we're meeting next week.
One thing I just want to, I don't think we've ever actually set a date for a special study session to discuss our rate strategy and how we use property taxes and so on. I think we generally agreed to try to set a time during the holiday week period when most people will be here. So
we pegged the 23rd. Am I wrong on that? I thought
did we
on
choose
my calendar a short bit ago.
Yeah, that was the suggested date, I think.
Yeah.
December 23rd.
Just fine.
Yeah, I thought we hadn't chosen the exact day, it was just the week of. So, I think, Michael, why don't you just choose a date and...
23rd is good. That's a Monday.
Yeah.
And we want to probably stay away from the middle of the day, so
So we've suggested later in the day so that it would be after the ski day. So like at 4 p.m. or something like that.
4 p.m.?
How many hours do we want?
Well, I think this is your idea.
Well, I'd suggest 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on how much time we want, but I mean.
I would at least think a couple hours.
I prefer to. I mean, just,
Okay, well, you guys are the
if you
skiers,
can
so
make it.
that's great.
You available?
Yeah, I'm flexible.
Okay, 2 p.m. on the 23rd will be a special sort of study
And Rena's
session.
going to supply us with eggnog? For that meeting? We might need some.
And if we sort of planned it on 2 to 5,
Okay.
I think that would be.
That's fine.
And if we finish early, great.
More eggnog.
Okay, thanks, Bob Indy.
That's what I'm hoping.
Standish Finance.
Real briefly, we met yesterday. I think the two primary activities are what you heard from Howard Barnes and Michael on a 10-year financial forecast and RUS supplemental loan application, where I think the goal is to submit that this week. And then secondly, we had the auditors present the presentation that they made last week and answer questions for the audit committee members. And there's some follow-up work to do on how to have less comments and eliminate some of the comments we had this year for next year. And I guess finally, there's a little bit of mismatch between our auditor's view of their skill set and the seniority that they applied and our staff's view of that. So,
Okay. Interesting.
We heard both sides.
Okay. Peter, operations and capital.
Nothing new to report on operations since we haven't met, and I think we covered everything on capital pretty thoroughly with the slideshows and.
And I think I had the same question you had, which is let's get on top of this, whatever the hell we're calling it, the power problems, reactive energy and harmonics. And so those units, I think, are going to be owned by us, not rented.
Good. And then personnel, I think we need to set a next meeting, but I think it's appropriate to wait until the officer election in December. I think the president will be the chair of that committee. And I think the next meeting is for a review of goals for the end of Q2. And there may be other items as well at that point. Okay, we go on to 11, general discussion. Are there any other questions for clarification or agenda items people would like to bring up?
I have a question, which is who grooms the 55 miles of Silver Bear snowmobile trails? Who maintains that?
I think that's a service. I don't think that's Bear Valley that does that.
It's the guy down at Bear River.
Oh, is it him?
Yeah, I think that because he operates the concession down there in the wintertime. That's why they plow the road. I'm pretty sure that's always been run by the owner of Bear River.
Erica had one.
I mean, some years, I
may go on a
they get a lot
snowmobile
of
tour. It looks like kind of fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of people do that actually.
Michael, did you say you had something?
Yeah, the staff of the district would like to thank the board for all of it does for them and wish you a very happy Thanksgiving. And to this end, I personally baked these pies.
That's a
delicious
fine way to thank us.
caramel apple pies for your enjoyment. Please disregard the high heel stickers that you might find on the cover.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Is the sign up for electronic billing available now, Bob?
What's that?
Is this sign up for electronic billing available now?
No.
Okay.
No, but when we're ready
Thank you.
to start testing, I'd like you to try out the site.
Thank you very much.
I registered.
Yeah, but you're registered, yeah.
But I'm going to register Alan right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, with this wonderful gift, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I think I would like to adjourn the meeting. It's a great way to end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.